13 meeting of the Planning and Transportation Commission, and I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask Secretary Elner to call the roll.
Commissioner Alchek.
Present.
Vice Chair Keller.
Present.
Commissioner King.
Present.
Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Chair Michael.
Present.
Commissioner Fazeli.
Present.
Commissioner Tanaka. Commissioner Tanaka did say he was going to be absent tonight.
Okay. Well, the first item on the agenda is oral communications, which is the time we allow members of the public to speak on any item not on this evening's agenda. Do we have any speaker cards for people who have something for oral communications? So, hearing none, we'll move on. And we have the pleasure this evening of having Hillary Gittleman, the new Director of Planning and Community Environment for the City of Palo Alto, at our first ever meeting of the Planning Commission. And perhaps, Hillary, you could just introduce yourself to us and to the meeting, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair Michael and Commissioners. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm coming to you from Napa County, so a very different place, but I've worked in planning in the Bay Area for over 20 years now. And one of the goals of my professional career, I've always tried to work in really beautiful places that are really committed to good planning principles. So it seemed like Palo Alto was a good follow-up to Napa, where I believe both those things are true. It's also, I'm learning, a very interesting time to have arrived on your shores. And I wanted to make sure, I don't know if we're going to do the whole director's report right now, but I wanted to make sure you are aware of the events that transpired at yesterday's, was it yesterday? Yes. Council meeting, yes, yesterday's council meeting.
So on that point, if you're ready, I think we will propose a change to the agenda. So the item which is towards the end of the meeting, the director's report, we would move up to happen right now. And if you'd like to do that, please proceed with the director's report.
Great, thank you. I just thought the commission would like to know, if you haven't read about it in the newspapers already, but at the start of the meeting yesterday, the mayor announced that he was setting aside 2 upcoming agenda items about planned community projects. The 27 University and the J. Paul project were both on the council's agenda in the next few weeks, and he said he was going to remove those from the agenda, and in their place on December 2nd he's proposing a study session on really the future of the city, how to initiate a community conversation about the vision and the future of the city, something that I know the commission's been engaged in as you have taken on updating the comprehensive plan. So that was the first announcement he made. He also said that on December 9th, the council would have a study session to discuss the implications of the Measure D decision. So what that means in terms of the city's loan, city's housing element, other implications of that. So both of those items, I'm sure, will engender a lot of community interest and discussion, and I know the commissioners are likely to be interested in them, because particularly the first one, I think, is going to set the stage for a lot of really good, thoughtful planning and interweaving of some of the individual activities, downtown cap study, comprehensive plan update, TDM program, and other things that staff and the commission have been working on. It's interesting that in addition to those 2 study sessions, we have another handful of items that are making their way towards council. One is, I'm not sure if you're aware of the 240 Hamilton project. It's an appeal of an ARB decision. That's also going to council on December 9th at this point. And on December 9th, we're also scheduled to have a study session on transportation demand management. So that will be a full night for us. And then December 16th, we're scheduled to have a discussion with the council on the residential permit parking framework. So sort of the policy framework around residential permit parking programs. So it's going to be a very busy month leading up to the holidays, and I encourage you to ask any questions of me that you'd like and we'll be in touch about all these things as they move forward.
So thank you very much, and welcome to Palo Alto. And
Thank you.
And we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Keller has a question, or Vice Chair Keller has a question.
Thank you. My question is, since these matters are not prior to those council items going before the commission, is there any advice from from council as to whether or how the commission individual commissioners may or should not weigh in?
Thank you, Vice Chair Keller. Cara Silver, Senior Assistant City Attorney. So with respect to the Commission's input on the long-range planning issues that the Planning Director mentioned, that certainly those issues are ongoing. They are legislative actions for the most part, and it's appropriate if you want to, let the council know your views on that. Either show up at the study session or some other way. It's appropriate to do that. I don't know if on the Maybell issue there in Measure D, of course there will be some follow-up actions that also will probably be broad policy-related items that it's likely that the council will actually be asking for your input moving forward.
Thank you.
Do any of the other commissioners have any questions for the staff or Director Kittleman? Okay. So thank you again. So now we'll open the public hearing and move to the first item on our agenda, which is the Urban Forest Master Plan draft for our review and comment. And we'll begin with a presentation from staff.
Good evening, Commissioners. Glad to be back, and thank you for your review of this document. It's been a long time in coming, in fact, 7 years in development. We're really thrilled to present you with a complete draft tonight, and we look forward to coming back at a future date for your referral of this document to Council. With that being said, I have a very short presentation, and then I'm going to open it up to your questions. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Walter Passmore. I'm the urban forester. All right. Can't do two things at once. So first, why does Palo Alto need an urban forest master plan? I've outlined a number of bullets here. First is that the urban forest master plan is actually assigned in our current version of the comprehensive plan, which is under review right now. It is not specifically assigned in the 1998 comprehensive plan. However, it is implied that we should be caring for our urban forest in a number of programs identified in the 98 plan. Secondly, it envisions a more beneficial, resilient, and unique urban forest. Even though I think there's a wide awareness of the great urban forest that we have here in Palo Alto, there's still room for improvement. We can have more benefits returned in the form of environmental benefits, in the form of economic benefits, in the form of social benefits by taking care of our urban forest. We want an urban forest that is resilient into the future, that addresses some of the issues and challenges that were brought out by our community surveys and 7 years worth of input and feedback into this document. We also want a unique urban forest. I think Palo Alto is a unique community, and we should definitely strive to have an urban forest that is representative of the quality of life that we have here in Palo Alto. Third, it connects and coordinates implementation. As many of you are aware, decisions are made about our urban forest across departments and between the city and our constituents. So this document links those important partnerships. It communicates expectations. And lastly, it enhances quality of life. We are always looking for how we can improve our situation. And while we do have a wonderful community to live in, there's still some things that we could make a little bit better. And we've tried to identify what those are in this document and identify a pathway to get there. That was part of our original assignment from City Council, was not only to describe what the urban forest looks like and how to take care of it, but also to create an action plan for the future. So what's included? I'm not going to go over the entire table of contents. I'm going to touch on a few things. So the information chapters are really just the facts. They describe what our urban forest looks like, how diverse it is, how much canopy do we have, what do people think about it, and there's some wow facts, if you would, infused all through the information chapter. For instance, Palo Alto residents started planting trees in the 1890s. That is a very long history of people who thought urban forestry was important to this community. Fast forward 100 years, in 1982, we wrote our first street tree management plan. So we have more than a 30-year documented history of a structured program through the city to care for our urban forest. In 2007, we initiated the Urban Forest Master Plan process. A few other wow facts on the economic side. Our urban forest generates $3.22 in benefits for every dollar that we invest. If we had more programs like that in the city that were returning a 322% return on an annual basis, I think we'd be in pretty good shape financially. We currently have a 92.5% street tree occupancy rate. Not 100, but we're doing pretty good. One of the programs in the Urban Forest Master Plan in the last section on goals, policies, and programs is to try to achieve a 98% occupancy rate. We think that is the maximum allowable, accounting for some mortality over time. We're currently returning $73.21 in benefit cost differential, so basically our profit margin for every person every year in Palo Alto, one of the highest in the nation. In 1982, our canopy was 32.8% citywide. In 2010, it's 37.6%. So over the years, we've actually increased the amount of canopy that we have, which is directly inverse to the national trend in urban areas where canopy is decreasing at a rapid rate. So we have a lot of things to be proud of. We're near the top in most of the metrics that you gauge how healthy your urban forest is. We're not at the top in every one, and again, there's still some room for improvement. We have not reached the pinnacle of success, and this plan, I hope, presents a vision and a roadmap of how to get there. So some next steps. Review and comment period is anticipated through February 2014, though you may all realize that large-scale plans like large-scale projects, we sometimes have delays, and for good reason, we sometimes extend periods of public comment and review. So that's what we're anticipating right now is through the end of February. We do have an open portal on the city website where the complete draft copy of the master plan is available, and we're also planning to add an opinion survey in the near future so that people that cannot attend commission meetings or may not feel as comfortable in a formal setting have an opportunity to provide comment and feedback. We're also going to be extending additional outreach offers to groups that would like to review the plan and have some one-on-one dialogue with staff. There's going to be a simultaneous evaluation of the budget impacts of implementing the plan. We're going to create a phased implementation schedule for the goals, policies, and programs. We anticipate that it will take 10 years for us to implement all the goals, policies, and programs contained in the plan. We're also going to be evaluating the environmental review process that may be necessary for the plan and implementation. We'll be making edits and revisions so that we can bring back an edited version to this commission as well as other groups. And then finally, we're hoping that this commission, as well as our other constituent groups, will convey to council their interest in this document and hopefully their endorsement by about March of 2014. With that, I'm going to conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the commissioners may have.
So thank you very much, Walter. Robin, do we have any speaker cards for this?
No.
Okay. So to the commission then, open it up for comments, 5 minutes each.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Pinelli, to begin.
I certainly wasn't selected for this commission for my incredibly deep knowledge about tree canopy and urban forests. So I just have a really simple question. I've read the letter from the Canopy Board of Directors. It sounds like they're in violent approval of this draft and encouraging us to bless it. But did you receive any negative feedback or any? I guess the question is, has everybody who's weighed in on this from the community said it's on board? And if not, then what's contentious about it?
I don't think that we have any real contentious subjects at this point in time. You know, we've been under development for years, and I think the big issues have been resolved. What we have now are issues such as those identified in the canopy letter, where there may be some impressions made by some of the images or some of the text that we're having suggestions to change. And so some of those edits we're able to do at this time, and some we can't because we've synthesized so many comments into this document. So we are trying to make it clear to our constituent groups that, you know, we do obviously value all of the feedback that we get, and we'll try to make changes that accommodate their wishes to the extent possible.
Well, let me boil it down more simply. Did any of the constituents say we shouldn't move forward on this, or are they all saying this is better than what we have today, so we should move forward on it, but we can make it better on the margin?
What we've been getting recently is hearty endorsement, but it's also truthful feedback. So if you read the Canopy letter and they identified an issue such as the images in the message from the urban forester are all from very highly urbanized areas, and they don't want Palo Alto to turn into downtown New York. And while I do understand, you know, that sentiment, we have placed images and text in the document for a reason, and those particular are just really strong examples of what I think urban development may turn into in the future. And I think we need to be very innovative, and we can justify taking innovative approaches because of the real estate values and the quality of life that we have here in Palo Alto. I think we should envision a future where Palo Alto is the model for other communities. So everyone has basically said it's on target, they love it, and they just like this one little thing changed.
Thank you.
Commissioner King, do you have any questions or comments?
Just a quick one. Thanks for all your work on this, Walter. Appreciate it. So on those, you discussed some financial returns and return on investment numbers. I assume are those within the plan? If one were to go to the website and look at the plan, you'd see the sources for those. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then just in general, what are the revenue sources that contribute to an actual return on investment that you're counting?
A lot of the benefit value is generated either from avoidance cost, from infrastructure longevity, such as extended asphalt duration, or from values added to other things. For instance, property values are elevated with healthy urban forest. Sales taxes are elevated because of a healthy urban forest. And those kind of benefits have been modeled, and we can quantify them. Realize that a lot of benefits have not yet been modeled, so we can't quantify everything. We can't quantify benefits like urban forest enhance the learning environment of students. There's a documented correlation, and it's statistically significant, but we can't place a dollar value on that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Martinez?
Good. Thank you. Today I was driving home from Stanford and was driving down Alma, and I passed by Bowden Park, and there were these magnificent red flowering trees, a big cluster of them. Everyone take notice of that if you haven't had a chance. I don't know whether they were liquid amber or whatever. It reminded me how wonderful our urban forest is, and how important your report is. And I wanted to thank you for that. I think it's a very beautiful report, and although long and tedious, it's pretty easy to read and ignore the parts you don't want to read, and read about the history of trees in Palo Alto, and look at the photographs, and scroll down to the comp plan, the policies and programs. I accidentally called it comp plan because I think in terms of form and structure, it looks a lot like the way we structured our updated comp plan. And I know imitation is the highest form of flattery, but don't do it again. So I'm very supportive of the report and your hard work and the information it provides and the outreach. I do have some constructive criticisms, and one is that as an architect, I take things very literally. For example, it's called a master plan, but I don't see a plan. And to me, a plan is a place, a sort of a form of an idea. I see policies for implementing different strategies. And when I looked, I just lost my place, but when I read through it trying to find what urban forest is, because when I first heard urban forest, I thought of the Enchanted Forest, Sherwood Forest, places that have this imagery to them. But when you defined early on in the text an urban forest, you said, page 5, define the urban forest as a combination of public and private trees. And I said, is that what it is? Is it just trees? And, I started saying how much I love our trees, but is our urban forest master plan just about trees? It seems it's about places as well, places we love, places that don't have trees, some urban places that are just places where we want to sit. So I'm a little bit taken back by, I don't want to say the narrowness, because the report is really wide and really opens up your imagination, but it's really focused really on a limited aspect of our urban forest. The second thing that I was looking for is really what is the greatest threat to our urban forest? Sure, it's climate change and when people don't water their trees and things like that. But really, as a public policy, it's urban development, growth, the taking of some of our open spaces for hardscape, for buildings and parking lots. And I didn't see anywhere in the report where we addressed any sort of reaction or policy or program that addressed downtown development, development in the neighborhoods, CalAV. And I think since this is a draft, maybe there's still an opportunity to incorporate some of that into the plan. But overall, I'm a big fan of your work. Some of the policy for urban development might be something like sort of an urban development equity, sort of that development should include, I'll finish with this note, development should include some responsibility for urban forest. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent comments.
Certainly.
Commissioner Alchek?
Thank you for kind of heading the effort to continue working on this. I'm going to pick up where Chair Martinez left off. Excuse me, Commissioner Martinez left off. Chair Emeritus. Last time, actually, you came before us, we had a discussion. In your presentation, you had talked about how the development of Palo Alto had so significantly enhanced the canopy that it would be a misconception to suggest that the development of our city in some way impacted the canopy in a negative way. And I think that what Commissioner Martinez is sort of suggesting he didn't see in this report is something we saw last time. And I remember I made a comment saying, let's make sure not to pit development against trees if in fact the numbers suggest that the development has encouraged canopy growth. So I guess before we put that back in there, I just want the numbers to sort of speak for themselves. I thought it was great when I read again, just reading the report and sort of their little blurbs that you did from, I guess, Craigslist ads. And every single one's tree-lined street. It's such an important component of what we associate with the appeal of this city. And the issue I sort of wanted to address today, or I'd at least hear some of your thoughts on, was on page 89 of the actual plan, there's this discussion of competition for space, specifically the idea that people who would like to install solar panels on their roof might be affected by tree canopy. Maybe their neighbor's pine makes their rooftop unsuitable for solar. And I don't know if Palo Alto's adopted this in its building code. I feel like I heard a rumor, or maybe it's a California thing, that there's this, we're taking a step in the direction that like all new dwellings in 2020, I'm making this up, but I think there's something in the pipeline somewhere about how new single-family dwellings they're trying to encourage solar panel adoption just across the board for all those types of developments. I don't know if that's a Palo Alto specific thing, a Bay Area or a California-wide thing. I wonder if maybe there needs to be a little bit more discussion about this quote-unquote competition. I happen to live next to someone whose house is solar outfitted, and it's spectacular how much power she's producing and how little she sort of needs to take from the grid. And I think that's a really impressive feat. And I think maybe a little bit more discussion about how, and maybe there is in a different location, I'm just not aware of it, how Palo Alto will mediate sort of this idea of, okay, it's a big tree and it's been here a long time. And that's really, you can't, once you cut it, you can't get it back. Also, there's this idea of our, energy independence and kind of obtaining energy from renewable sources. And so I'd be curious to kind of read more about that in this plan, because it seems like we're about to be on the forefront of that issue, if in fact there is some policy.
I agree, and that's one of the issues that we speak to in probably less detail than what we'll be forced to look at in the future. There's new state legislation that just got passed regarding how to resolve the conflict between trees and solar, and bottom line is whichever came first has precedent. So the state has initiatives to promote solar, and rightly so, but we also want to protect trees. And we're working very closely with our utilities department to figure out ways to do both. Where that probably crosses more into the planning regime is where we're allowing new developments to go through green building, and we're trying to have energy self-sufficient buildings. We may have to in the future modify our parking lot shading requirement or other requirements that we place to be able to obtain solar benefits and also retain the environmental benefits of having trees and vegetation in our high density developments.
That's it for me.
Vice Chair Keller.
Thank you. So firstly, there are several references in the plan regarding a generic comment about more trees in the north and not nearly as many trees in the South Palo Alto. And I think that if you consider the map on page 37 of the plan, which delineates, and a table on page 36, which delineates it down by neighborhood, I think we should be more neighborhood specific. For example, the Evergreen Park neighborhood is listed as North Palo Alto according to this, but yet it's below average. And the Barron Park neighborhood is listed in this as being in South Palo Alto, and yet it's above average. So I think that we can be a little bit more refined in terms of thinking about the neighborhoods. And I also think that in the process of considering neighborhoods, when you get to page 44, there's a removal of commercial areas, and so that winds up removing a few neighborhoods that are partly residential and partly commercial. For example, one of the lower neighborhoods in terms of trees in Palo Alto is listed as being Charleston Terrace. Part of that is residential, and part of that is non-residential, and probably I would guess that if you will, San Antonio Road might be the dividing line. So I'm wondering if there's ways of subdividing those to get so that you're not excluding the measurement of residential neighborhoods that, because of your subdivision, because of your way of dividing up the map, ignore them because they include a commercial component, and therefore, in some sense, if those neighborhoods wind up being improved, you won't measure it, and if those neighborhoods wind up not being improved, you won't notice it. So I think that there are ways of considering that. There's also a consideration of the tree species. In some neighborhoods, the species of trees are such that the tree canopy from one side of the street extends all the way to connect with the tree canopy the other side of the street. As if you're in a forest, the monkeys can jump from one side to the other. I don't think we have any monkeys in Palo Alto, but it gives you that image. On the other hand, in a lot of other neighborhoods, particularly neighborhoods in South Palo Alto, you don't have that. You have trees on one side that don't extend anywhere near towards the middle of the street and connect with the trees on the other side. And they're spaced a little further apart. The trees are also spaced a little further apart than, say, Professorville, as an example, or Old Palo Alto. There's also the thing that in some neighborhoods, the trees are planted against the curb, and there's a fixed curb, vertical curb, there's a tree planting area, and then there's a sidewalk. In other neighborhoods, there's a rolled curb, a sidewalk, and then there's a tree planting area, and that also makes it harder to plant trees in a way that has a surface that covers the street. And I think that it's worthwhile thinking in terms of choice of trees that do further extend out the tree or out to the street, so that you get the benefit of what you're talking about, 50% cover. Because I think if you talk about 50% street cover, you'd see even more disparities between different neighborhoods. I'm wondering the extent to which the natural environment element might involve any additional input based on the work that you've done here. I know that natural environment element, I assume, is the one that references what you're doing. I'm wondering if there's anything in it that needs to be changed or as a result of that. I understand that the tree technical manual, that you're making some changes to that. And go ahead.
That is proposed in the Goals, Policies, and Programs section.
Thank you. And I guess that there's a potential for changing the tree protection ordinance. And is that something that would that happen, and how would it happen if it were to?
So that's a little bit different recommendation, because the Urban Forest Master Plan does not direct City Council to change municipal code. However, we did want to describe the comments that we received the amount of feedback regarding municipal code and some of the issues that have been raised by constituents, such as should we protect redwood trees, or should we protect other native trees that are not currently protected. There's a lot of issues that constituents raised, and what we're advising through the master plan is for council to take a look at those issues and consider opening the municipal code back up for review and edit.
Thank you. And one last thing is, I think there is some interest that's been expressed of having a solar canopy on parking lots, at photovoltaic panels on parking lots as a way of providing shading and power. And so to the extent that that makes sense, I guess the municipal code would have to be amended to allow that as an alternative, so that you have a mixture of trees and PV panels providing canopy. I would suspect that because PV panels are that much more efficient, that the ratio should be higher than the 50% for that to count. You know, maybe PV panels count at half the level, half the number of square footage that they cover, as opposed to trees that aren't as efficient in coverage, if you know what I mean. So that's something that I think that's worthwhile considering. Thank you for excellent work. I guess if this comes back before us, we can consider the issue of whether to recommend to the City Council such things as prioritization and opening up the tree protection ordinance. Thank you.
So, Mr. Passmore, I want to thank you that the PTC has been developing our capacity recently to deal with challenges and controversies. You've brought us a planning program that seems to have nearly universal support, so we really appreciate that. I did have a couple questions. One is that, to my knowledge, Palo Alto doesn't require homeowners to get specific approval of their landscaping in their yard, including bushes and flowers or even trees that they would plant. And I know when we built our house, we did plant some trees in the front yard and in the backyard, and they've come in, and that was a good experience that we've had. But what in the master plan is the differentiation between the city trees and then trees that homeowners have on their own property?
The city trees are those in the public right-of-way and on public properties such as parks and open space and city facilities. The privately owned trees would be everything on either residential, commercial property. They actually constitute the majority of the tree population in Palo Alto, and that's precisely why the input from this commission is so important, is because we have a document that is going to influence choices of private property owners on planting and caring for the trees on their own property.
So, to what extent does the draft master plan sort of imply policies or programs that would directly affect sort of privately owned trees? Is there a place, as we go to review this, or the public goes to review it, where would we look for that?
That's going to be contained in the goals, policies, and programs section. And so I would advise that you take a careful look at that, and that's probably where your input and feedback is going to be the most valuable, is to make sure that we get that section of the document precisely the way that we want it before we forward to council.
Okay. So my next question or comment is, I know that infrastructure is important to the city in all different ways, including the conditions of the sidewalks. And the street trees often sort of impact the sidewalks. How is that covered in the draft master plan?
We don't describe impact to sidewalks specifically, although we do, in general terms, talk about reducing the conflicts between infrastructure and trees. One example of how we're implementing that, even though the master plan is not yet adopted, is that we're revising standard details so that we can allow tree roots to pass underneath sidewalks without heaving them. It's a form of root baiting, so we're designating a corridor of desirable soil that the roots can grow into, and therefore they're much less likely to damage the infrastructure over time. So we do realize that that is a problem, but the master plan doesn't speak to very specific details like that. It just describes in broad terms that we want to reduce those conflicts.
Okay. And I just wanted to follow up on the point raised by a number of my colleagues about the policy on solar, which I think comes into Goal 2 and the citywide sustainability plan. And as I was reviewing the goals, I was mindful of the experience of one of my friends in Palo Alto who is very up on clean energy, and I asked him if he was intending to install solar on his home, and he said, well, there's two reasons why it wasn't feasible. One is that with all credit to the Palo Alto utilities, the rates charged by the utilities are so low that the payback would take a very long period of time, so it may not be economically desirable. But also his backyard trees would shade the roof so that it actually wouldn't be a good location. So I think that the issue about trying to help clarify how is the attractiveness of installing solar and sustainability and whatnot increases over time, and maintaining the balance with the aesthetics and other aspects of the urban forest would be an important thing to clarify in the final plan. And I also note that if I look at Palo Alto either from a distance, from the hills looking back, or even within the city, kind of what you see are the trees. You don't so much see the rooftops. And I know that the residential property height limit is of great importance in the city. And as long as we have trees that are above the rooftops, what you see are the trees. You don't see the rooftops. And that may have an impact in terms of the solar aspect of the plan. And I'm not sure if that will ever change or if it should change, but this probably has an important point of intersection with your work. And those were my only comments. Did anybody have anything on a second round that they wanted to raise? We just had a couple. Chair Emeritus Martinez.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Keller kind of alluded to this, and that's the place of the urban forest master plan in relationship to the comprehensive plan. I think there's a somewhat unique relationship of the master plan to the comprehensive plan, that it doesn't appear in the pedestrian bicycle master plan or any of the other climate change. And we address those in the comprehensive plan. But it seems to me that the urban forest master plan policies and programs and its overall goals touch on almost every aspect of the comprehensive plan. And it seems to me that there needs to be a more dynamic relationship between the two. That when an applicant comes forth with a applicant to develop something, that they often quote the policies and programs that support what they want to do. I think they should also be looking at the policies and programs of the Urban Forest Master Plan, because those are as intrinsic, as important as most of the policies, programs we have in the comprehensive plan. So maybe both sides, you need to look at a stronger linkage to the comprehensive plan than what you've put forth so far. And maybe we need to do the same thing on our side, is really reach and try to make a stronger connection for the protection of trees and the growth of the canopy, and a density equity nexus. Really try to be a little stronger in the relationship between the two and our expectation of development as it goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very insightful advice.
Vice Chair Keller?
Thank you. Two additional thoughts to think about. One is that in respect to the nature of the tree canopy in the event of redevelopment, I'm wondering, in some sense, the tree protection ordinance is a gross measure of protecting trees. I'm wondering whether, and also protecting street trees is clearly a part of what we do in development. But we don't have any notion that says that if you have a certain amount of tree canopy that you have to retain some nature of that tree canopy. So I'm wondering if there's a notion that says that maybe no net loss of tree canopy or something like that. So if you do redevelopment, you do some retention in some way. I'm not sure how you measure that, and I'm not sure whether there's some equity for somebody whose property is entirely covered by trees too, that they can't develop at all. But some metric like that might make sense, and I'm not sure where that would fit.
We actually have that as policy 1G in the goals, policies, and programs. It says strive for no net loss of canopy. Now, that's a very broad statement, so how that's applied to individual development review will be a question that we have to work out, after the plan's adopted. But that is also a very strong statement that I think can provide some guidance to us as we move forward.
Well, I think that unless that is implemented in something having to do with the municipal code that directs, that is either a criteria for the ARB or criteria for the city, for the planning department when it's looking at developments, unless it's incorporated in that, it doesn't have the same weight. And because the tree, as I understand this document, is not considered incorporated by reference into the planning, into the comprehensive plan, as are some other documents. For example, the Baylands Master Plan is incorporated by reference, but this is not. Then it doesn't give it the same weight. One last quick thing is that I've experienced myself in my own home 2 trees that were cut down by the city. That one of them was growing against a utility pole, and I kept on trimming it back, and then I said, the tree's got to go, and that was okay because the tree was sort of not a very good tree anyway. And every time it got trimmed back, there wasn't much canopy left to it, and it wasn't endangering the utility poles, so that was okay. In the front, however, there was a street tree that died, and because it was adjacent, but by the way, I planted other trees elsewhere, but the city canopy would plant a tree where it was, but not somewhere else. So, but then the front and the street tree, I had a street tree that died because of age and water, because it was getting watered. And it turned out that it was it was between 2 water meters. And apparently that was allowed when it was put in, but not allowed subsequently. And as a result of that, the city refuses to put in another street tree. So I'm wondering what the criteria are for that, because if you're going to have a thing like no net loss of street trees, and you have rules like that, it gets problematic. Thank you.
With that, we look forward to seeing the final efforts on the master plan when it's ready after the comment period. So thank you very much, and I guess we will take a 10-minute break and come back and deal with the Matadero Bike Boulevard when we return.
Yeah. Maybe you could just start pitching the developments. Yes.
Okay, everybody is back, so let's reopen the meeting, resume the meeting. And our topic is the Matadero Bicycle Boulevard Plan. And we'll begin with a presentation from staff.
Good evening. My name is Jaime Rodriguez. I'm the Chief Transportation Official for the City of Palo Alto, and I'll be giving the presentation this evening. Before I get started, I just did want to recognize a couple of people here in the audience with us tonight. First and foremost is Sylvia Starlack. She's our Safe Routes to School Assistant Coordinator, but has been serving as the project lead for the development of this project with the community, and as well as Robert Neff from the Palo Alto Bicycle Advisory Committee. And Robert will speak on behalf of Payback at the end of our presentation for this project. So thank you for having us here tonight. Tonight we're here to talk about the Matadero Margarita Bicycle Boulevard project. The city completed the development of its bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan probably about a year and a half now. It's been adopted about a year ago, last summer. And as part of the development of that plan, we prioritized various types of bicycle and pedestrian projects within the plan. Bicycle boulevards were identified as the specific preferred type of bicycle facility within the community, and we categorized several bicycle boulevard projects for implementation within the community. The Matadero Margarita Bicycle Boulevard was the number 2 priority project behind the Park Boulevard Bicycle Boulevard project. And what I'll do right now is show you really how the Matadero Margarita Boulevard connects with other adjacent projects. So really quick, here's a graphic of that portion of Palo Alto within the Barron Park neighborhood. In purple is the Matadero Margarita Bicycle Boulevard project. It's bound, on the west side by the Bull Park path that kind of traverses behind Gunn High School and ends up near Hanover. And to the east at Park Boulevard. Park Boulevard, the bicycle boulevard currently ends just south of Oregon Expressway, and we have a separate project that will be kicking off next calendar year to continue that bicycle boulevard on Park down Wilkie into Mountain View. That's shown in purple dashed. We also have an active bicycle boulevard project on Maybell Avenue that we've currently started designing with the community. And those 2 specific boulevards, the Matadero Margarita and Maybell, will be connected through a series of proposed bicycle routes within the Barron Park neighborhood. That project shown in green there will be kicking off next year as well. So by the end of next summer, next fall, we'll have a full design palette of bicycle boulevard to bicycle routes that we'll be implementing within the following year after that. Lastly, what you see here is bicycle boulevard and just bike lane projects that are connected adjacent to that area. So you see the existing bike lanes on Charleston and Rastradero, on Meadow, and on Bryant Street. So it begins to give you a picture of how all the different projects begin to connect together. A lot of times when we design these boulevards or projects, they look like they're isolated, but they are intended to connect by design. We just have a lot of projects that are in the design queue, and eventually things will all link together. We've held a couple of community meetings now with the community. We held our first outreach meeting back in March where we really introduced the development of the Bicycle Boulevard project to the community, introduced concepts for typical bicycle boulevard strategies, and more importantly, solicited input from the community about things they wanted to see within the Bicycle Boulevard design. We had a follow-up meeting in September where we presented draft concept plans that we were trying to respond to that input that we received from the community in the spring. And we also worked through the Bicycle Advisory Committee every month from the time that we started the project to make sure that they were providing input on the design of the project itself. We also have an active website for the project on the city's website. So if residents go to cityofpaloalto.org, hit transportation projects, and they'll find the Matadero Bicycle Boulevard project itself. To quickly summarize the input that we received in the initial outreach meetings, the thing that was loud and clear for the community was they wanted us to really not just focus on bicyclists, but really try and make as much of an effort as we could to implement bicycle and pedestrian improvements along with ADA improvements where we could accommodate wheel-bound or patrons with disability needs. There were also requests to just in general improve sight distance at intersections to make sure there was clear lines of sight between bicyclists and pedestrians and vehicles traveling through the corridor. They were trying to find ways to discourage speeding and that we really pay close attention to key intersections that were important to the community, which we'll show you shortly. Specifically, though, Josina Tipawingo along Matadero was a corridor, an intersection of key interest to the community. There was interest in wanting to make sure there were improvements at the Bull Park path, and more importantly, at the El Camino Real intersection. We also received input to look at bicycle and pedestrian opportunities outside of this corridor, specifically what's been called the Chamales Greenbelt path, which is a path that's just to the north of this project, not in the current bicycle plan, but we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. At Payback, there were specific requests to try and remove barriers for bicyclists. So typically when we do bicycle boulevard projects, we try to remove barriers such as all-way stops and try to, in their place, offer alternative mitigations such as a traffic circle, bulb outs, or some other type of a measure that will slow vehicle movements at an intersection to allow them to intermix with bicyclists safely. There are also requests to try and improve the Park Boulevard and Margarita openings to the project. So I'm going to walk you through the proposed boulevard, but I'm going to switch gears here. This is the presentation that we put together for the community, but what we found in presenting things to the community, it's really a lot easier just to show people a PDF and kind of walk you through it. So I'm going to start with the westmost part of the project, which is Matadero and the Bull Park path. So specifically, what we tried to do here was try to improve the pedestrian crossing or bicycle crossing that goes across Matadero at the Bull Park path. So you see here that we introduce green treatments as well as enhance the crossing and really guide bicyclists off of the boulevard onto the Bull Park path. We also are introducing identity markers to make people, specifically motorists, know that they're entering a roadway that is a bicycle boulevard by introducing branding signage, identity markers with green pavement messages. And what you also see here is that we're trying to respond to those concerns regarding speeding along Matadero. So we're showing speed humps, or similar to the things that you see on Maybell Avenue that slow vehicles down as they go over them. We also have sharrows, in this case greenback sharrows, to help reiterate that message to motorists that they're sharing the roadway with another mode, in this case bicyclists. Here at Emma Court, you see again an additional speed hump with more greenback sharrows. Everywhere there is an intersection crossing, we use specific branding for the bicycle boulevard. In this case, it would just say Matadero, but it would have a certain color and bicycle logo to distinguish that to people, so that as they turn onto and off of those streets, they recognize that they're on a corridor of significant importance to bicyclists. Those same type of treatments continue until we get to that key intersection at Josina and Tipawingo. And this is really probably where we spent a majority of our time with the community, trying to figure out, what type of a design can we come up with in an interim solution as well as a long-term solution. And what's shown here is really the interim option. If you're not familiar with the area, Josina and Tipawingo, Matadero kind of has two back-to-back horizontal curves, or an S curve on the roadway, and sight distance on the roadway is actually very limited, and there aren't any existing controls to try and stop traffic on Matadero because of the fact that there aren't clear lines of sight, so that if people were stopped, they could actually see a car stopped ahead of them and make a decision to have an oncoming, as to whether they should proceed forward or reduce their speeds. So what we've recommended is, in response to community input, was to try and slow vehicle speeds approaching Josina coming from El Camino. And you see here this speed hump before the intersection. And we've also dropped a speed table to serve as a pedestrian crossing, because that was one of the main things that we heard from the community, that there was no safe provision for pedestrians to traverse across Matadero at that intersection. And it is one of the key routes for Safe Routes to School program for kids that are getting to Barron School in this area. One of the other things that we also heard was that we wanted to try and find ways to make the street more walkable. This specific intersection came up several times to the development of our Safe Routes to School program for Barron School, and that there really wasn't any safe areas for pedestrians to congregate at the intersection when they were trying to get across the intersection. So what we're showing here is the creation of pedestrian dwelling areas, as well as expansion of the berms along Matadero roadway to kind of serve and dub as pedestrian facilities during periods of fair weather. And we also are creating pedestrian refuge areas on this side of Josina, right across from Tippawingo. We create those through a recommendation for berms that kind of both slow vehicles down as they kind of go through the intersection, and create isolated areas where pedestrians can dwell while they're waiting for cars to traverse through the intersection itself. There is here a recommendation ultimately for us to look at trying to get pedestrians that are actually walking along Matadero, between Josina and Tippawingo. Specifically, probably one of the recommendations I've heard several times since I started working for Palo Alto was that if we could find opportunities to try and get some type of a bridge that would be along the bridge over the creek there, which is this kind of element shown in orange. That type of an improvement would be outside the scope of this specific project, but we are recommending that we study ways to try and get some type of a bridge across, or I should say along, in this case, Matadero, or look for ways to try and actually realign Tippawingo and Josina, along with additional creek improvements so that we get rid of those offsets of the roadway itself. So continuing down from Josina Tippawingo, we have more share the road or share road type facilities. And then when we get to the intersection at El Camino Real, we have really here just a concept of a type of improvements that we could do at the intersection. In this case, El Camino Real has crosswalks both on the north and south sides of the intersection. One concept that we could look at would be to combine those really just into one crossing and try and guide bicyclists, through the intersection, through sharrows in the corridor. This is strictly a concept of the type of improvement that we could do. The state of California, or Caltrans, owns and operates the intersection here. And one of the things that we're recommending is to actually work with them to determine how we could actually improve that intersection at the same time that we do a design concept for Maybell down the street. So trying to do both these projects as once. On Margarita, we have very similar treatments to what we talked about at Matadero, with share the road type facility improvements, leading up to Orinda, where we have an existing all-the-way stop. At this particular intersection, one of the recommendations that we were hearing from our advisory committee, and we support that recommendation at staff level, is to try and see if we can remove that barrier for bicyclists, but offer some form of alternative mitigation for the removal of the stop. In this case, we're showing a concept of a traffic circle, which everybody could ride around, but that would require additional study. And so if the commission and the council ultimately approve this concept plan, we would start a separate study effort to determine if we could safely remove that all-way stop, and in its place put a circle or some other type of an improvement that we developed through a community outreach process. Lastly, at Park Boulevard, there's an existing traffic calming barrier that restricts vehicles from driving north and south on Park at Margarita, but we had heard several requests if we could open more of the slots that allow bicyclists to ride through there, so that more bicyclists can move through at once, and then to guide people, to guide bicyclists, if you're going north, to get on one side of the barrier, if you're coming south, to get on another side of the barrier. So we're recommending to go ahead and respond to that request from the community. So I'm going to quickly switch back now to the presentation. So we kind of walked you through the plan itself, but what we're asking the commission to do tonight is to approve this concept of the plan. We just happen to be in a position within the city that there are active projects happening within the area. And given that we receive positive community support for a majority of the elements that were in the plan that we just walked you through, we did want to try to accelerate some of the improvements to take advantage of those construction projects. Specifically, we have an opportunity to build the speed humps and speed tables along Matadero this winter as part of an active project that's happening in that area. So if the commission supports and the council supports the project, we could technically get those improvements in within the next 2 to 3 months. We could also build that pedestrian refuge that we talked about at Josina. We would then, later this spring, begin to accelerate other design elements of the project. Specifically, we could implement, all the green bicycle treatments, the wayfinding signage, the branding signage. We could, build the enhanced crosswalks at Josina and Tipawingo that we showed you, which in this case would include a pedestrian-activated flashing beacon to help pedestrians give more warning to motorists that they're beginning to cross the street there. We would also begin the study process to do that all-way stop removal at Orinda and identify an appropriate mitigation, if there is one. And if there isn't and we have to leave the all-way stop, then that could also be a likely finding. We would recommend also for next year to, whatever that improvement is, to build it in the following fiscal year at Orinda. But more importantly, begin that design process with Caltrans to figure out what can we do long-term at the intersection of El Camino Real. And I just wanted to also make the point again for you and for the community that we wouldn't do any type of a design effort at El Camino, Matadero, Margarita without looking at El Camino, Maybell, El Camino Way at the same time. It would make sense for us to do one cohesive design effort. And then lastly, there are some improvements that we did think were really good types of improvements that we could offer to the community, but that were really just outside the scope of this specific type of a project. So again, we talked about that option for a bridge along the north side of the Matadero Creek at Tipawingo and Josina, or trying to find ways to, again, realign those two roadways and potentially build, say, a brand new box culvert underneath Matadero. It would be a much more extensive project outside of the scope, but it would definitely be something that would be worth studying. We also had several requests to, either one, do this or not do this, but do the Chamales study for that greenbelt improvement. Again, that's not something that's within the existing bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan. And because we have limited resources to design facilities that are recommended within the plan itself, we're recommending that we kind of keep that as a project kind of on hold for now. And when we update the next version of the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan, that we make that a recommended project for study at a future date. And then lastly, we would implement whatever improvements are recommended at El Camino and Matadero Margarita at the same time that we would implement improvements at Maybell El Camino Way. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Our recommendation to staff is, of course, after your discussion, if you feel so inclined, to forward a recommendation to the City Council to approve this concept plan line for the Matadero Margarita Bicycle Boulevard.
Now, when you began, you said that Mr. Neff would be speaking on behalf of Payback. Is this
Yes.
the time for Mr. Neff to come up? And
thank you for reminding me.
Sure. So please.
Yeah, good evening, Commissioners. So Payback, as you probably know, is a voluntary committee serving as an advisory role to planning and transportation staff. So we've meet monthly to give advice on projects like this Bike Boulevard, and also members were heavily involved with the development of the 2012 Bike Pedestrian Transportation Plan. We're excited about the steady progress being made to implement the Bike Boulevard network with the improved facilities, traffic calming, and signage throughout the city. I am particularly excited about the progress on the Maybell Margarita Boulevard. When I first moved here about 18 years ago, I had many fine streets in Palo Alto to bicycle on, but I didn't know how to make the connections or what the best way was to get across town. And it was difficult to identify a good route to take. After 6 months of bike commuting on a route that included a left turn off of Page Mill Expressway, a coworker clued me in on Park Boulevard, Matadero Margarita, and the Bull Park Bike Path. At the time, these routes were unmarked on the city bike map. So when I finally found them, it was a great route. I was really glad to get off Page Mill Expressway. In the last 2 years, the city has started implementing the Bike Boulevard network, including the segment on Park Boulevard and now this Matadero Margarita Bike Boulevard. With this improvement, this will make Matadero Margarita more attractive to all levels of bicyclists and improve the signage and mapping, which will make it easier for new bicyclists to identify good routes like this one around Palo Alto. Hopefully we'll have them ending up on Park and Matadero and Margarita and not on less appropriate, less safe roads for biking. In particular, the Matadero, as Jaime said, this is an important link between Bull Park and Park Boulevard. And if you start at California Avenue, this is a good connection to get to Gunn High School, to the VA, to Arastradero Road, and on Arastradero there's Tesla and VMware and many other businesses up that way. So I'm excited about this Bike Boulevard and look forward to its implementation. Thanks.
So thank you very much. I believe we just have one speaker card from the public. We have plenty. Okay, so let's go to the public, and Vice Chair Keller.
Yes, there's six. There's six. Don't worry about it. He only saw the last one. Thank you. The first speaker is John Dunek, to be followed by Lydia Koo.
How much time?
You have 3 minutes each.
Thank you, Commissioners and Chairman. I'm John Dunnick. I'm a resident on Chamalis Drive. Before I get to what I was going to talk about, I'm a little bit disturbed by Jaime's presentation, indicating that there was no dissenting vote about the proposed Greenbelt alternative on Chamalis. He had that on his presentation. We had several people object to it, myself included, and I see no reference to any non-rosy acceptance of that. I think that would be a terrible idea. Let me get to my main talk. What I'm mostly concerned about is the traffic calming. Matadero is one of the main main arteries going into Barron Park. That and Arastadero probably bear most of the traffic. If we place traffic calming, which I'm in support of, on that road, almost certainly what it's going to do is displace that to the neighboring roads. As I look at Barron and Chamalis as the two neighboring roads, as I look at the plan downstream, Barron will also get bicycle designation, which means that the brunt of the overflow, I believe, is going to go to Chamalis. So what I propose is that you delay this decision until a little bit more systematic approach to what the traffic is going to be when you put traffic calming onto a major artery like this. Don't get me wrong, I'm very supportive of bike paths. I think it's a great idea. But you're placing a bike path on a major artery. And when you do that, you're going to displace that traffic onto the neighboring streets. I have a related one. As I look at, this was a Daily Post from last week. It was about Maybell, but it had the comment of the neighborhood was already suffering from traffic that was avoiding the Arastadero Road because the city reduced the lanes in that street. I think we're going to end up with a very similar situation on Chamalis. That's my point. What I propose is that you look at what this would do system level to our neighborhood, and then look at how you are going to mitigate that for the future. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Lydia Koo, to be followed by Susan Stowers. I can't read it very well. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. At the last community meeting, the city transportation officer rejected answering my question. Therefore, I'm bringing it to you tonight. Has transportation staff taken into account the upcoming developments in the planning department's pipeline, such as I noticed today that you do have the California concept plan that is put out. It's the November version, and there's quite a few properties, developments that's in the pipeline, some pending, some already approved. But I have some other ones to add. Stanford University's Mayfield housing projects at 2500 El Camino Real will be mixed use with 70 1 to 3 bedroom below market rental housing units and 7,300 square feet of commercial space. 1601 South California Avenue, new residential housing totaling 180 units, of which 68 are single-family homes and 112 2+ bedroom units in 2 multi-family buildings. 1701 Page Mill Road is a 2-story R&D building with 116,000 square feet of new floor area. 1400 Page Mill Road, 2-story commercial building of 86,925 square feet of new floor area. 1845 El Camino, 5,489 square feet, 3-story mixed-use commercial and residential condominium project. The count here adds up to possibly, including the California concept plan, of 700 plus residential units in the planning and ARB pipeline. Additionally, a potential of 1,065 0.043 square feet of new commercial space. So please don't tell me this will not increase traffic, and traffic will bleed into the neighborhood. I recommend to you to put a halt to any more changes to any streets, especially implementation of any more bicycle boulevards or lane reduction. Instead, recommend to City Council to return Arostadero and Charleston roads to 4 lanes. In doing so, perhaps you will be able to restore some of the residents' quality of life in the neighborhoods, avoid dangerous and life-threatening traffic situations, and put a stop to the mess on the streets. Thank you.
The next speaker is Susan Stowers, I can't read the last part, F, to be followed by Sheila Dunick.
Thank you, sir, and I have a hard time reading my own handwriting, too. Thank you, Commissioners and Chair, for hearing me. I am Suzanne Stowers Soul. My husband and I are here as residents of Barron Park and residents on Matadero Avenue. We are asking for you to decline this project plan at this time. We would like you to move the plan towards the future and outscope projects as identified, in that the Smolis Greenbelt is a wiser decision. It addresses the payback concern for no stops. It provides them a dedicated bicycle passage that provides them a safe passage. One of the concerns I have is between El Camino Real and Josina is a very narrow passage, and as a walker, a bicyclist, and a vehicle driver, I have encountered very frightful situations for bicyclists and pedestrians in that very narrow passage, and there's no place to widen it. That's one element that wasn't addressed. As a bicyclist, when I've ridden to work, taking the Bowl Park, when I come on to Matadero, I have encountered cars that have nearly taken me out. As a vehicle driver, driving towards El Camino, I have had many situations where bicyclists are flying out of Whistler and putting their lives in their own hands as I slam on brakes already at a low speed to avoid them. Matadero is, as was stated the earlier speaker, an artery, and it has taken on an enormous amount of traffic. I understand that there was a traffic study done that claimed that there was only increase of 1 car. That is the most ridiculous thing I have heard. And I again ask that the council decline this project at this time and instead move up the future outscope plans as a primary consideration. Thank you for your time.
The next speaker is Sheila Dunick, to be followed by Bambi Fleeman.
I would just like to register my opposition based on over 45 years of living on Chamalis and having the idea of turning the Greenbelt into a bikeway or putting a bikeway down the Greenbelt has been opposed by the vast majority of Chamalis residents since, well, before we were even part of Palo Alto. The reason being is we already are putting up with a great deal of noise and pollution, inconvenience, even toxic waste plumes that come out of the CPI Varian operations that are just beyond the sound wall. We have ongoing noise and lights and homeless people in the Greenbelt, graffiti sprayed on the walls. It's an area that's very difficult, and we're working closely with the industrial park leases, and they have been very cooperative in trying to keep it unpublic and as a buffer between their operations and our residences. The thought of having this be a bicycle corridor that would either have to be well lighted at night to be safe, well supervised and policed, which I can't imagine because it's just not a very trafficked area, but we would be vulnerable to either lights or an exacerbation of problems that we've already been dealing with for decades. So I hope you will consider that, and I'm sorry for Suzanne's plea to you to see this as a solution, because I think the vast majority of Shermala Street residents are absolutely opposed to it. Thank you.
The next speaker is Bambi Fleeman, and our final speaker after that is Art Lieberman.
Hello, thank you for listening to me. I brought a couple of photographs, and then I realized that my concern was on Park Boulevard, which is another project. He explained it to me a little bit ago. But I have some photographs from a couple of spots on Park Boulevard where one in particular, I think we need a red curb because I pull out there every morning and there is an intersection, but cars are parking in the intersection, which I cannot see the bicyclists. And today I almost hit one. And so I brought a photograph of that at Park Boulevard and Fernando. Thank you. And in addition, he showed the pathway at Margarita where it comes to park there. There's another spot a bit further down where the bikes are required to go into the gutter and go over the drain in the gutter. And when my children were young, I used a bicycle trailer with my bicycle, and it was kind of scary getting in there. It was narrow, and you know, with the drain there, it was kind of scary. And so that's one area I recommend improvement upon. And then I had two other concerns, but again, it's well, one is Matadero Margaritas, though, and that was what you alluded to with the intersections owned by Caltran, and it's just not exactly safe for pedestrians at that intersection, because to cross El Camino, you only get one light to cross, and it turns green at the wrong time. So people turning left onto El Camino from Margarita are going to mow us down when we're crossing El Camino. So I think that crossing really needs work so that people can safely cross. And the other area of my concern was on Park Boulevard again, I'm sorry, but it's near Oregon, where there's a new development of apartments, and there was a zebra crossing, what I call zebra crossing, installed that had lights on it, but the lights are not working now, and there's no street lighting there, and especially because there's going to be a big construction project there, it's an area of concern for us in the Ventura neighborhood. Okay, thank you.
And our final speaker is Art Lieberman.
Good evening. I was initially skeptical about this idea, how to combine one of the principal roads in Barron Park with bicycle usage. I think Jaime did an excellent job in outreach to the community in acquiring, recording, including the responses and concerns of the Barron Park community in this plan. What I've heard, the traffic calming recommendations in this report are welcome, but I do have a few comments. For this plan to be a success, it will require the cooperation of everyone, motorists, of course, but also bicyclists. Input from the bicycle community came from PAP&TC. They represent a community that is interested primarily in making bicycle riding easier, more convenient. That's important. But as important, or maybe even more so, is making bicycle riding safer with regard to cooperating and respecting pedestrians, cooperating and respecting motorists. I have a general concern about the need for more bicycle safety training for the bicyclists of all ages in our community. I've seen, and perhaps you have also seen, bicyclists behaving badly, bicyclists riding the wrong way in bicycle lanes elsewhere in the city, not a Matadero. That's not possible. It's too narrow a street. I've also seen bicyclists riding side by side, which would be a disaster on Matadero because that is a very narrow street. I've even with the speed bumps, that wouldn't reduce that risk. And I've seen bicyclists riding and texting, bicyclists riding aggressively and intimidating and endangering pedestrians. In that regard, I think the educational aspects of the plan, which are really very good ones about putting signage and markings, really should be implement it sooner rather than in phase 2. It's to emphasize to everybody that if this is going to happen, you should be aware of it sooner, and everybody it becomes knowledgeable about that fact at an early point. I have a comment about the Chamalis Greenbelt Trail. It was suggested during the meetings. I heard people suggest it, but it really hasn't been vetted, as has been mentioned just previous to me. It was raised by a few people, not because people were concerned with the feasibility of providing a safe, because people were concerned with the fact that whether Matadero could be a safe route. The Greenbelt is between the industrial park and homes, and I don't think the city or CPI would be in favor of a bikeway that's within 20 feet of one of the largest places that stores and uses extremely hazardous material in the city. The bicycle plan did suggest a route that's in the bicycle plan that goes through the variant parking lot to El Camino, which is the Greenbelt place would end up right on El Camino. It would be dead end there. So that path in the bicycle plan, I think, is one that should be studied rather than the Chamalis Greenbelt. Finally, this bicycle boulevard plan is proposed to connect Bull Park shared path with the Park Boulevard, which is already heavily used as a bicycle by bicyclists, and is planned to become a future bicycle boulevard. If this monstrous J. Paul project is approved, riding on Park Boulevard will become an impossibility because of all the additional traffic. And this bicycle boulevard will become a bicycle boulevard to nowhere. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank all of the members of the public who came this evening and gave your comments. We really appreciate the engagement of the community with the Planning Commission. Now let's go to the commissioners for their questions and comments. Maybe starting with Commissioner King this time. Okay, you'll go later. Maybe Commissioner Pinelli, are you ready? 5 minutes?
Sure, thank you. Anytime I see a project, the first question I tend to ask is, I try to get clarity on is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And I'd really like to see it. I know it sounds obtuse. I know it should be obvious, but I think we need to have a problem statement or a goal of the project to be really clear about what we're trying to accomplish. For example, is it to reduce the risk to bicyclists, but to increase the speed of bicyclists, because you mentioned removing barriers, without reducing the quality of travel for autos and pedestrians? That would be a goal. Or to say a bicyclist should be able to go from point A, say Foothill or Rastradero, to point B, say the Baylands, in X number of minutes. I think if we described it that way, that would be, I think, really helpful. The other thing is, I'm data-driven. That's just my nature. And I don't understand the extent of the problem, meaning I have a pretty good sense, I think, at least qualitatively, of the north-south traffic in Palo Alto, bicycle traffic. And by the way, I have the same concerns about Park Avenue. I'm nervous every time I drive down there, especially at this time of the year when it gets dark really early. It's really scary. So, so I have a good sense of north-south traffic. I don't have a good sense of east-west traffic, meaning, I'm sorry, I guess technically southwest to northeast, if we want to be really technical about it. But how many bicyclists are we talking about who are traveling across El Camino or across Alma, and all the way to, say, across Middlefield? I don't know what these numbers are. Are we talking about benefiting a small number of people and inconveniencing a huge number of people? I'd like to see more depth in the analysis here. But don't get me wrong, I'm very supportive of the concept I am very supportive of the trend of the increase in use of bicycles, to the point where my ideal situation would be to see the north-south bike boulevard on Park go away and replace it with a closed trench all the way up and down the peninsula for Caltrain, and sitting on top of Caltrain where the tracks run today, a bike expressway. Thank you.
Commissioner King?
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Question regarding, I remember a few years ago, the project was not the same, but it was a traffic calming project that they put in on Santa Cruz Avenue. And there was such outcry after the thing was put in that they ended up tearing it all back out. And I don't think it ever went back in. So I'm always concerned that there's going to be something irreversible, or that there's a great investment and then it isn't met with acceptance by the populace. So in this case, can you confirm then what impact or what input the traffic engineers had in the plan?
Thank you, Commissioner King. Specifically with this project, one of the things that is nice from a traffic engineering perspective is that Matadero and Margarita already have relatively low vehicular volumes. That's one of the key things that we look for when we're implementing a bicycle boulevard. We're really looking for streets that have low volumes, typically something below 4,000 vehicles a day. In the case of the portion of Matadero, which is the only segment I have some immediate data for that I can share with you, is we have about 850 cars, per day in each approach of Matadero. Specifically during that morning hour, there's about 70 to 90 cars in each direction in that peak hour of the day, which is probably about 7 to 8, 7:30 to 8:30, that time range. So, that's what makes this a very nice bicycle boulevard opportunity, in that we don't really have to do much to try and, from a traffic calming perspective, try and discourage vehicles from being on there, because there's already a very extremely low volume of vehicles in that area. I know that the residents, may feel much differently about that. They live there every day, and we take a snapshot, and our snapshot shows, what we were hearing during the development of the bike plan. And for us, just in response to Commissioner Pinelli, that's our vision. Our vision is the vision that we went through for a year and a half to develop this document here, which is the network of streets that we're trying to implement. And so in this specific case, we're not trying to say just, try to get from the Baylands to Rush Preserve in 2 minutes on a bike. That's not what we're saying. It's you're trying to build the network, and that's why we spent that time at the beginning of the presentation to show you how in that immediate vicinity, things begin to connect together. They connect together, through the vision of the plan, which this was one of those community preferred projects that we identified during the development of the bike plan itself.
Okay, thank you. And do you know then traffic flows, you're saying 70 to 90 peak hour traffic. Do we know how that compares to Barron and to Maybell?
So we don't have the Barron volumes. That will be a project that kicks off later this coming year. And so we'll collect all that data as part of that process. In the case of Barron, we're not envisioning the level of improvements that we're doing on Barron as we're proposing here on Matadero Margarita, because this is a bicycle boulevard. At least that's how it's recommended within the plan. Barron and some of the other streets that we showed in that earlier slide are identified as bike routes. So really we're just more identifying them through signage and markings, but likely not doing a significant amount of traffic calming measures.
Okay. And Maybell, do you remember the traffic numbers for Maybell?
I don't have those with me. I apologize.
Okay. I suspect several in the eyes do, but in any event, thanks. I believe it would be, in your intuitive sense, Maybell would probably have the most traffic. Then would Barron have less than Matadero likely?
We would likely be seeing more on Matadero than we would on Barron.
Yeah.
And and that's because Matadero is serving, for the most part, a lot of the community. It's the main route for both bicycling pedestrians as well as motorists that are coming into Barron School in the morning.
Okay.
And I'm taking Josina, by the way.
Got it. And was Barron considered all as the bike boulevard?
Not during the development of the bike plan, no.
Okay, it's just inappropriate because it's a more of a residential street?
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's good to be a residential street. It's just in this case, the connection was more to try and get to major facilities. In the case of Matadero, it's to the Bull Park path and to the Park Boulevard, Bicycle Boulevard, as to where Barron would kind of tee in at Laguna. And then you have to drive back up. So that's why it wasn't recommended as a bicycle boulevard.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And let's see. And maybe you can address then, it looks like I was not familiar with it, but I see now I'm looking on the Google Maps that right-of-way, discussed as a green belt. So that looks like that runs all the way from El Camino up to the Bull Park bike path. And who owns that right-of-way? Is that the City of Palo Alto?
To be honest with you, Commissioner King, I don't know. I've heard different inputs, during the community outreach process. Some people said it was Stanford land, some said it was city land. We haven't validated that. We didn't identify that as a project during the development of the bicycle pedestrian plan, so we didn't really put too much effort into it. I think what we were trying to do in response to the comments is not to say that, yes, we as city think it's a good idea to build it, but we think it's at least a good idea to keep it on the queue so that when we go through the next bicycle and pedestrian implementation plan development, we can throw that back out to the community. You heard tonight, the mix that we heard during the meeting. Some people actually love the idea of this whole, it was the worst thing in the world. But we don't know which way it would be. It would just need more community discussion. And from our standpoint, we're focusing on the current plan. That would be something we would want to take up during the development of the next plan.
Okay, thanks, ma'am. One more question, please. Yeah. Well, actually, it's a comment. So I am totally sensitive to the drivers finding other routes when traffic is calm, as we've seen with the Rostradero. Although I know that I've been on that street on a regular basis, and Tipawingo is at such a steep angle back. It would seem hard. Intuitively, I don't see that people would want to take that backwards turn, then go on a smaller street just for that short section. So in my mind, and with all respect to the commenter, I just can't see people would go through all that effort to cut through for one block. The one thing, it looks like from a pedestrian standpoint, I hear the commenters' discussion of the bike pedestrian conflict with no sidewalks. It seems that that section from Josina to El Camino is a real problem. Are there any potential solutions to minimize that conflict?
Thank you, Commissioner King. The city has put some efforts in the past to try and improve that pedestrian situation. There have been, again, what we typically do in Barron Park is we as a city, build more kind of valley gutters that dub as both drainage facilities as well as during fair weather concrete walkable surfaces for pedestrians. The Barron Park neighborhood community does have a preference to try and remain more of a rural environment. Mm-hmm. That's why the majority of lack of dedicated sidewalk facilities, but we recognize that need for there to be walkable surfaces, and those valley gutters in this case are the element that's being proposed through the Josina intersection.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. And then when you do take this to council, I think it might be helpful if you actually show a graphic of what the berms are. I know what a berm looks like in the dictionary, but I don't know what they look like in this case. And that seems like one thing that, oh, great.
What was the thing we said yesterday at pre-council? So it shall be said, so shall it be done.
Oh, yes.
Whatever it was, Arthur. Yeah. And so this happens to be a picture of some of the asphalt berms that we've built, within the community in the past. So what you see here are these berms that they're about a foot wide and about 6 inches tall, and they really have two main functions. First and foremost, they're barriers to vehicles. So we force vehicles to drive, around an intersection, through a section at a much slower speed, and so the berms are acting in essence in the form of a curb, but they also, provide a refuge area for pedestrians. And here at Rostradero and Hillview, you see the area we're creating for pedestrians to walk behind through an intersection that can be relatively busy with much higher speeds, along a Rostradero road. But they also continue to allow drainage through, so that we allow us to implement immediate safety improvements without having significant costs to have to rebuild the intersection and tear it up and build, gutters and that type of thing. And so the berms are functional in that standpoint. Our advisory committee at Payback did express some concerns that we should make sure that they're very visible at nighttime, make sure that they're painted, they're highly reflective. And within the plan, we are proposing to have these kind of edge lines to kind of guide bicyclists coming up Josina to make sure they don't hit the berms themselves. But that's just the image.
Okay, great. Thanks. And if anybody has questions for Robert, I would have a follow-on question if he comes back up. If not, I'll ask him personally. Well, why don't we? Well, Robert, my question, I guess, is on the El Camino crossing. So if a bicyclist is to make a left turn onto Matadero from either direction on El Camino, I know now I see some cities are putting in these left turn blocks where you go through the intersection, there's a block, you wait, and then you make the left turn to cross. What's the state of the art or payback?
Well, as a bicyclist, you have two choices. You can act like a vehicle and you get into the left-hand lane and you wait for the light and you turn like a car. And the other option is to act like a pedestrian or a lot like a pedestrian. So you stay to the right and you cross, say, Margarita with the light as the El Camino traffic, and then you wait, and when the light changes, then you cross the other way. And what you find is that more experienced or brave or whatever you call it, or stupid, I don't know which, but I will take the left turn off of El Camino, and a lot of people are not that comfortable out in the middle of that traffic, and so they'll stay to the right and then just wait for the light to change to get across.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Martinez?
I'm fortunate to live near a great bicycle boulevard, and I enjoy it, appreciate it, and that's Bryant Street. I have a feeling, though, that we're not talking Bryant Street here, that it's a lot more complex. That street, I don't feel that cars are avoiding it and, cutting through other streets. I don't really have any empirical evidence to support that, but it just doesn't feel like that. But there's still few cars and some bicycles, not a lot of bicycle boulevard kind of props or graffiti painted on the pavement, the Shero stuff and that. But it really works. Can you assure us that what we're proposing to do here will be like Bryant Street?
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. We actually have several bicycle boulevard projects currently out in an RFP form or request for proposals. One of those projects is actually to revisit the existing segments of the bicycle boulevard on Bryant Street that are active, specifically, from the north up near Menlo Park, where the Bryant Street Bicycle Boulevard currently ends down at Meadow. So the types of treatments that you're seeing here with the branding and the green bicycle treatments at key gateway entries and greenback sharrows, those are things that we will actually be looking to implement on Bryant, even on the parts of Bryant that are already active. And then that same RFP includes completion of the Bryant Street Bicycle Boulevard down into Mountain View. So what we're trying to do right now through this project is kind of set up kind of demonstrations for the types of bicycle boulevard treatments that we'll be likely be implementing over time throughout the entire city. And these are more of the types of best practices for bicycle boulevards that you typically see around the country. Bryant Street is a great bicycle boulevard. It was the first bicycle boulevard, but there hasn't been much development or innovation beyond its initial development in Palo Alto since that time. And we're in a lot of ways now, beginning to catch up with some of the other measures that other communities do. For better or worse, we don't have to implement them because other people have them, but the more awareness that we can provide to motorists that they are sharing that space with bicyclists, the better. And in this case, the measures you're seeing here are the types of improvements that we're currently recommending for the community.
So is that a yes?
Yes.
You didn't say much about sort of what the traffic studies have told you about how many cars during, the going to school hours and after school hours are on these streets, and how many bicycles now use it, and what are the anticipations for cut across traffic to other streets, impacting other streets. Can you comment on that for us? Because I don't think we've convinced everyone in the audience it's going to work that way.
Thank you, Chair Martinez. We don't have, unfortunately, through most of Palo Alto, we don't really have strong data regarding just bicycle volumes in general. I mean, we do have a pretty good handle on how many bicyclists there are at the schools because we can count those on an annual basis. But we're really lacking good tools to help us kind of capture ongoing bicycle and pedestrian data. The same way we do for vehicles. That's been one of our biggest challenges, specifically with our Safe Routes to School program. And so, short of having someone sit on a roadway for 24 hours a day for 7 days a week, it's almost impossible to get that data. We're starting to develop tools, identify tools that we want to deploy within the community. We just don't have that strong data today. So when we're developing this bicycle boulevard, we're really focusing on the community telling us where are your safety measures, from a vehicle and pedestrian or bicyclist perspective, and how can we, implement some improvements that respond to those concerns. And that's really what we have here. And in this case, we followed this up with our Safe Routes to School program for Barron Park. Matadero and Margarita are identified as key commute routes for students that are bicycling and walking to Barron School. And these also support the routes to school for Gun High School, for Sherman Middle School. And so, we don't have that strong data. I apologize that we don't. It's something that we're working on for all of these projects. But, we know that's what people want to take because that's what people told us they wanted through the development of the bike and pedestrian transportation plan. And it's also the input we were hearing to the development of the Safe Routes to School programs for each of these schools.
So, one last question then. Okay. So one of the things that I think we've learned over this year, and probably before, is the importance of public outreach and the accurate reporting of what has been said. And it sounded like from your report that really the neighborhood is behind this, and you've got a lot of good input and like that. But then when we have a hearing like this, and I'm certain when it goes to council, we're going to hear from people that are very unhappy and aren't convinced that this will work the way in which we say it will. So what is not working in the outreach that we're not reaching the public, or maybe to be more fair, is that you're not hearing the criticism, and we're not hearing them from you, that it's not a unanimous vote of the community that these are supported. I don't know if there's an answer, and I hate to put you on the spot, but it just sounds like there are more serious issues about traffic and speed of traffic and like that, that we're being asked to make a recommendation about without having really better data on whether this is going to improve that situation or not. So.
Okay, thank you, Chair Martinez. It is a valid comment, and we really have been doing our best. We did have 2 very specific outreach meetings, and we made sure that we shared additional opportunities for the community to provide input on this project during the Palo Alto Bicycle Advisory Commission. In this case, we have to thank Art. We really looked to Art and his Barron Park neighbors to help us provide outreach to the community that we were even trying to solicit input on these projects, and it really took a much different approach with this project than others that we had in the past, and we were really making an effort to get people to participate in the process. In addition to the meetings that we had here, we actually met with several of the Barron Park neighborhood leaders, late on a Friday afternoon, and kind of walked, portions of the corridor with them. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I felt fairly comfortable to say that, we had a majority support for people that were at these meetings. There's always going to be people that aren't happy with some of the things that we either just for whatever reason can't implement with this project. They would rather see improvements in other places. Chamalis Greenbelt was one example of that. That just happened to be an area that we're not really ready to take any type of position on. It was something that was new to us as part of this process that it just requires additional analysis later. And as far as your comment regarding collecting more data, I do think you're right. We've been really doing our best trying to research with companies. We've been inviting companies to help us develop tools to do bicycle and pedestrian counting and analysis, and we just we're having a really hard time finding people to develop these tools for us. I think that if we were able to develop something, a lot of people in the country would be extremely interested in these types of tools, but they're just currently they're not there yet. Hint to all the Stanford research, graduate students.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Alchek.
It seems like there are two bike models, or excuse me, bike facility models. The first being you put bike lanes where people are already riding bikes, and the second would be to put bike lanes where you want people to ride their bikes. And I sort of feel like you should do both. In a perfect Palo Alto, every street would have a bike lane. One of the most troubling things about, I think, the last year has been that the night we reviewed the Arastadero Calming Project and recommended that it be adopted from its temporary test to its permanent solution, there was nobody here to talk about it. And I felt like there was a lot of community input that touched upon that issue when we dealt with Measure D, and was sort of surprised, and maybe in some regard, or not Measure D, excuse me, in the Maybell project. When we had that meeting, a lot of people were talking about, the Arastadero issue, and to what extent did, the aftermath of that affect our Maybell, the Maybell scenario. But I guess my point is this the right solution, and the Arastadero situation not necessarily working? One of the beauties of local government, right, is the idea that it's easy to access your leadership, and if something was implemented in a way that isn't working, you should theoretically be able to change it quickly. Healthcare.gov, impossible to change. PaloAlto.gov, much easier. So I guess I wonder if, because I think that was one of the first meetings I attended, I wonder if that issue needs further review. I think that I just don't like the idea that all this car traffic has moved off Arastadero and is affecting all these little streets, or at least that's what people are saying. And it's now clouding our sort of judgment on how to put a bike lane in a street where, however many kids ride to school any day. And we may put the bike lane 2 streets over, but they're still going to ride that street probably because it's the northernmost street and it's how they're going to get to El Camino. So I sort of believe you put bike lanes where you want them to ride and where they're riding, because it's going to provide safety. And at one point you asked a question about, should you make a left this way or do you cross the street on the right side? I'll tell you, if it was my child on the bike, I would insist that she walk it through the crosswalk, right? Because obviously safety is the most important issue here. So to some extent, this entire discussion is about creating a safer space for the people who are already on the road, as opposed to building, a bike freeway and saying, everybody come down this path. People are already there. So again, it was a commission that I wasn't on that initiated the Arastadero traffic calming measures. But it was our meeting where we finalized them, and we didn't have anybody here to talk about it. But I wonder if there needs to be a little more careful review of that, and I mention that because, these decisions that we make should not be forever. If analysis suggests we should adjust them. That's the whole point of local government. You try, it doesn't work, try something else. And I think it would be sort of, it would be a bad thing if we made a decision about something and then decided, well, we can't review it. We did that last year. That was the previous commission's job to look at Arrasodero. They made a solution. That solution is what they have to deal with. I guess my point is that it sounds to me like these very residential streets have become inundated with traffic that really should be on Arrasodero. I don't know whether we've gotten enough input about that, and I don't want it to cloud our judgment about bike lanes. So I just want to throw that out there. I know that our new director isn't here, but I just think in the aftermath of Maybell, that might be another issue to address alongside this. I don't have any particular problems suggesting that we push, we move this along to council and have them take a final look at it, because there's a lot of consensus here. And again, my approach is every street should have a bike lane. In this particular neighborhood where they don't have sidewalks, it just seems even more prudent considering how many schools are in that locale. So the sooner the better, probably, for many of those kids.
Vice Chair Keller.
Thank you. So firstly, I noticed that we've been talking about schools, but the map on our chart doesn't actually list the two elementary schools in Barron Park, Juana Briones and Barron Park Elementary. And listing those on the map would actually make it helpful in terms of understanding part of the reason for these for this route. It seems to me that there is a concern about the community in the community that is has a lot of validity to it about the potential for the Arrasodero Road changes, Charleston House Arrasodero Road changes, causing spillover traffic on Maybell or other streets. But it wouldn't have caused any spillover traffic on Matadero. That's way too far over. And the comparison of Arrasodero and Maybell to Matadero and Chamales is misplaced. And I think that the fact that Chamales doesn't go all the way to El Camino and that you have to take the weird curved street Tippawingo back, maybe that's why it's called Tippawingo, I don't know. But as Commissioner King had mentioned, I think that that's not a realistic issue. And I think that the fact that the Chamales Greenway has not been studied, that it is not clear that that's a substitute for the Matadero Margarita Bike Boulevard, and there's some controversy about that as well. Means that simply making that substitution does not make sense at this point either. With respect to Commissioner Olczyk's comment, I agree that the issue is you have to think about where the bicycles go and where they are going and where you want them to go. And I've heard the story about Dartmouth College paving over when they build a building, they don't put sidewalks in until they figure out where they're going to walk, and then they pave those sections so that they put sidewalks in where people want them. But I think that it's not only an issue of bike boulevards as where you want people to go, it's also an issue that we're increasing wayfinding. And so we're making it easier for people to get around the city. And even if people wanted to go that way, if they don't know the way, they might get lost. And so I think that having clear bike paths with signage and such is actually in and of itself a useful thing. I think that the idea of Matadero and in particular needing traffic calming is an issue considering the street is narrow and And I don't travel it that often, but I do occasionally, and I see that there is a concern about considering the narrowness of the streets and the bicycles, traffic calming does make sense there. So let me make a comment about support versus complaints. Most people are here because they're complaining. That's why people come to meetings to complain. Few people come to meetings because they like what's going on. We occasionally see an effort to get supporters here, and that happens. But I do notice that obviously if you don't like the way something has happened, you have much more motivation to come. So let me make an observation about this. I always recommend that people get involved when the comp plan is being reviewed. And if you don't, and then, because that sets the policies for everything. In this case, people had opportunity to get involved when the bike and pedestrian plan was reviewed and approved, because that's sort of like the part of the comp plan dealing with bicycles. And then people, for the comp plan, should get involved when the ordinance is approved. Because when a project comes along, according to that ordinance, and we say we have to approve that project because of the ordinance says it's okay, and they say, well, where were you when the ordinance was approved? You should have complained about the ordinance if you don't like its effect. But now here we have a project where there seems to be a variety of complaints. I think that some of them I think that all the complaints are valid, but I think that there are different balances in terms of this. You can't make the street work for everybody in a way that satisfies all of the constraints, but you can basically try to maximize the goodness for everybody here as much as possible. If you look at the nature of the connectedness of this along the fairly well-traveled bike path that goes from Gunn High School to Hanover Street and connecting that to Park Boulevard, I guess it is a very useful connection. And this is essentially the only way to do it. You can't really do it on Barron Avenue because of the crosswalk connection on El Camino. Los Robles is kind of south, and the El Camino way over there is a crazy intersection to go along on that side. So that's not really a good way. So this is actually the best way to connect across El Camino, and that makes sense. I'll just add that I think that more thought needs to be put on in terms of the El Camino intersection and the crosswalk along there, because the crosswalk would interfere with turns in different ways and through traffic across this, including the bicycles, and I'm a little concerned about that. But maybe there are better ways of making it safer and providing pedestrian refuges in the middle if people don't make it across all the way. With respect to Arinda, a quick note, we had talked earlier about the idea that bicyclists don't like to stop. In fact, they often don't. There's a potential, but it's not legal for them not to stop. I'm wondering if that's a problem at Arinda, whether it's possible to make it legal for bicycles not to stop and for cars to have to stop. I don't know if that's legal or not, but that's something that might be considered. And I'm not sure if the effect of that intersection will come back before the commission, or if we were to approve this, whether it would go on and we'd never see what happens to that intersection. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Keller. We actually did research the concept of allowing bicyclists to not have to stop at always stops or stops in general or reds at traffic signals. It's actually only one state that currently has a law that allows bicyclists to traverse through always stops. That's actually in Idaho. It's called the Idaho Stop Law. That law allows bicyclists to treat stops as yields and allows bicycles to proceed through red lights also without having to stop. There's only one other location that we were able to find that has a similar type of a law. It's actually a few locations within the state of Colorado, Summit County within Colorado, and Dillon, Colorado, Breckenridge, and Aspen just recently adopted a similar law. For us, we did look at it as part of the development of this project. We didn't feel comfortable recommending that type of recommendation because right now that would conflict with all of our safe routes to school education material that we're trying to teach within the school to encourage, students at a young age, to build, good habits as bicyclists or going to adulthood and to obey those laws. And so to introduce a concept for a law that would conflict with all that previous education we had done, we didn't seem like a good idea to us at this time. We could definitely pursue that some more if you'd like, but we didn't do it. We didn't do it today.
Thank you. So on the whole, I think this is a worthwhile project to support. I hope that the continued outreach will allow it to plan to be refined as best as it can be. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I went and consulted my copy of the Bicycle Pedestrian Transportation Plan, which is wonderful work, and note that this fits neatly in with the plan and it's a step forward. Echoing Commissioner Pinelli's preference for using data to make decisions, I think it would have been much better, or would be better in the future, if it's possible to get more data. And I think the daily number of car trips, the daily number of bicycle trips, usage by students going to school, usage by commuters going to work, recreational cyclists, average speed of cars, history of accidents, and then the parking conditions, what's allowed or restricted along that roadway would be very important to know. I found just in the last week 2 articles that I attempted to forward to my colleagues in the commission. One in the New York Times about, I think, Alexandria, Virginia, which is having sort of similar cyclist, infrastructure improvements, where there's a recognition that the usage of the roadways is about 98% cars and about 2% cyclists. And so there's some question of how that's balanced, and there's some frustration on both sides, particularly on the people who are trying to just have a timely passage from their home to work or what have you, and they feel very, very frustrated by that. Wall Street Journal had an article on drivers of cars who kill cyclists, fatalities and accidents. And part of the point of that article was that there's almost, unless there's a DUI involved or some recklessness, there's no penalty for killing a cyclist if you're driving a car. So I think in Palo Alto, we've seen some bike fatalities recently in the city, and these are all tragedies and avoidable tragedies in some cases. So I channeled my inner councilman, Mark Berman, today, and I got on my bicycle and I went along the Margarita and Matadero on my bicycle and just observed, after reading your report, all the ideas that were presented. And also, just as another footnote, I used to live in Barron Park, and I used Matadero as my primary route to work almost every day. It's an arterial, there's no stop signs, and the traffic tends to move pretty rapidly, certainly in the peak hours. People are in a hurry to get to work. I certainly was. But these are narrow streets. Recently, this year, a few months ago, there was Assembly Bill 1371 was passed, which is known as the 3 Feet for Safety Act. It requires 3 feet of clearance for vehicles passing a cyclist. I wonder if it's possible, with the width of these streets, for the city to be in compliance with Assembly Bill 1371. Margarita, there's cars parked on both sides. It's almost effectively a one-lane road with cars parked there. If you had cyclists coming both directions and cars coming in both directions, Assembly Bill 1371 requires, if you can't pass with at least 3 feet of clearance, you have to stop. So I think there should be some thought given to the constraints of the narrowness of these streets. It's manifestly not a bike boulevard in any sense of Bryant. There's no bike lane. You're talking about marking and sort of cautionary marking so that people are sort of more aware and alert of sharing the road with pedestrians. There's no sidewalks. What if there's on Matadero? What if there is on-street parking? It seems to me to be a potentially incredibly unsafe condition, particularly if, and just to maybe also footnote what I observed when I came back from my up and down Margarita and Matadero, then I turned left onto Park Boulevard, and that left turn definitely needs the improvements that you've recommended. That would be crucial. Then I went down Park Boulevard, noting all the problems and issues that are along there. Went in the underpass under California, and on both outbound and inbound on my ride, I passed a number of schools that were coming out of out for the day. Very young kids just tearing it off in all directions, 2 abreast, 3 abreast with a skateboarder in the middle, and in Barron Park, along Bryant, El Carmelo, Jordan, both California and Newell. And the notion that school children are going to line single file, it's just not going to happen. So I suspect that this is possibly a significant improvement over the existing conditions that I saw today. It's clearly not perfect. It may not be safe. I want to applaud you for doing your community outreach, although clearly you didn't achieve unanimous support. That's as good as you can get. And I also want to applaud your use of an advisory committee and getting their input. That's clearly an excellent tactic. But I also wonder, I suspect that there's going to be majority support on the commission to move this ahead. But I wonder if maybe it would be wise to defer until you also have the details for the Maybell portion of the improvements relative to the bike plan, which impacts to get the Matadero, Margarita, and Maybell really bracket what happens in Barron Park. And I wonder if you can know what to do with either one of them without knowing what to do with both of them. Maybe do you want to respond to any of that, or just want to acknowledge it?
Thank you, Chair Michael. Yeah, I do have a few kind of thoughts. I mean, definitely we're doing the best we can. And in this specific case, we're really trying to improve a facility that bicyclists, they already use it to the point of a Commissioner Alchek. This happens to be a facility that has very significant use already. It is the route that a lot of student bicyclists take to get to school. We're doing our best to improve that. A couple of the comments that I did hear from the Commission, as well as from you, is that the issue of bike lanes. Typically with the bike boulevard, we don't necessarily want bike lanes. That's a different type of a facility. That's something that we'd have more along of an arterial roadway or a residential arterial street. With bicycle boulevards, the concept really is to share the road. And when we're talking about neighborhood streets that are slightly narrower, such as Matadero, or I'll just throw a couple other streets out that I know of, like, say, Crescent Drive or West Crescent up northern Palo Alto, those are just very narrow streets, and then we'll never be able to achieve some of the goals and some of the laws that you just mentioned. In this particular case, we wouldn't want a bicyclist to ever pass, a motorist to pass a bicyclist on a street like this. We would expect them to share that road, to slow down right behind them. If the bicyclists aren't comfortable, they would like to yield out of the way to the side and let the bicycle pass, or the vehicle pass. We're really trying to encourage an environment where various modes are sharing that roadway space together. I do want to make the point, we're talking about the engineering side of things. There's still a lot of work that we have to do on the encouragement side. I think Sylvia and Kathy on our Safe Routes School, they do an absolutely wonderful job in teaching students, at the elementary school, middle, and now high school levels, about, being responsible bicyclists. We need to do more evaluation. Again, we're trying to find those tools to help us evaluate how our bicycle facilities are operating. We also need to educate as well as encourage within the schools. And it's not just one thing that we implement that will change and make things safer. It's taking that approach approach of, our 5 E's as part of our Safe Routes to School program, the concept of the bike and ped plans built around the 5 I's, including inclusion, innovation, and other measures. And so, in this particular case, I think it would be a good step forward. There will always be opportunities for improvement, and we will implement additional measures as we receive input from the community.
So I guess one final comment. I was surprised, and I'm not sure that my reaction should govern the proposal going forward. But I was surprised that at Matadero you opted for speed humps rather than stop signs. So I know other neighborhoods in Palo Alto have sort of a pattern of stop signs every other street, what have you. In my own sense of the car traffic in Matadero and my own personal experience is that it's sort of it's an arterial, and you sort of stop for no one. But I would seriously consider having a good answer to the proposal that you don't install stop signs, the speed humps, because I'm not sure that the speed humps are going to achieve the desired effect. Vice Chair Keller?
I'd like to move staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Vice Chair Keller, seconded by Commissioner King. Vice Chair Keller, would you like to speak to your motion?
Excuse me. Sorry about clearing my throat in the microphone. So firstly, I think that this is a project that is worthwhile doing. And I think that it will improve safety because it will not only slow down traffic that is speeding through, but it will also put drivers on alert that they should share the road with the bicyclists, and I think that that will improve the safety for bicycles. I would recommend that as part of this that you do some metrics, that you measure the time it takes to go from one end of the street to the other in the AM and PM rush hours, and measure that before and afterwards. And that if there's some way of measuring how long it takes a bicycle to go across that distance, and some informal measure of how safe bicyclists might feel after and before, perhaps that latter part could be done with cooperation of payback. And if there's any way of putting a rope count along Chamalis before and after in a comparable time of year, comparable time of the weather or whatever, and see whether there's any spillover traffic. I doubt very highly there is any, but that would allow us to definitively answer that. So those are my recommendations. They're not part of the motion to answer the question of Commissioner Martinez. But I think that would allow it so that, assuming this comes back to us for recommending a permanent adoption, we would have a metrics for doing that. Thank you.
Commissioner King, want to speak to your second?
Thank you. Yes. I'd like to thank staff and the community for their work in putting this plan together. I'm sure it's not perfect, but I think it's an important link. I'm excited to see it as a bicyclist, linking to networks of bike paths. I would like to also note that in this case, in the pre-meeting yesterday, we discussed the outreach efforts, and Jaime indicated that he had used those people who came to the meetings. He built an email list out of that. I also asked that for future projects which should be all, I guess, all projects should have public outreach, that there be clearly indicated a staff member or project email and contact information so that members of the public who are interested in that can both contact and comment, and also be added to any email lists. And I think it would be a great idea if you would, for upcoming projects, if either we could automatically, and listen to the other, you could see what the other commissioners think, either be added automatically to public outreach email lists, or at least let us know that if we want to, we can opt in, because I would like to see how the process is working to understand what the affected and interested citizens are seeing. So that's great. I think that's good progress. And then just peripherally, I'm ecstatic to see the volumes over the last several years. I've seen the volumes of people bicycling around Palo Alto go up. I don't know what they are, probably double or something, the numbers of people I see biking the streets. And that's great, although as one of the members of the public commented, it's crazy scary sometimes. Not just with the kids, but with the adults. I see rampant people blowing through stop signs at 15 miles an hour and not really paying attention to other bicyclists. There's like Bryant and North California is just a scary intersection. And so, I suspect it would have to be a California vehicle code mandate, but I would love to see there be bicycle licensing. To ride a bike out of parent supervision at any age, you need to get a bicycle license because you're basically supposed to comply with the same vehicle code that drivers comply with. So that's obviously a long-term thing, but I thank you for your work in education, but I just don't see a lot of compliance. Thanks.
Commissioner Martinez.
Yeah, I'm going to support the motion, but I would like to add, if there were any shining moments in our deliberations on the Maybell project, one was when the member of the public brought that video that showed all those cars and all those kids bicycling to school. It gave us immediate sense of the intensity of it, but it also showed that the kids weren't going crazy. They were all wearing helmets. It was manageable. The cars were respectful of these kids. And then when Council Member Berman at the council hearing on that, did his own video of when school is not in session, the cars go away. This is really an access to school issue, which every member of Palo Alto has a right to. It really added a lot of clarity, and I know staff is really busy, but to stand out on the street one morning at 7:55 and spend 5 or 10 minutes doing a video of bicycles going back and forth, the number of cars, it really gives us a sense of whether this is going to work and what the problem is. We don't need traffic counts. We don't need fancy technology. We just need you doing that little extra step to help us understand it. So, and I also want to thank you for doing this.
Commissioner Alchek.
So I'm curious, real quick, informal poll here. Is anybody else sort of interested in taking a closer look at the Arrastradero calming project? Are any of you motivated?
Is that agendized? Can we do that tonight?
I'm not saying tonight. I'm saying, is it something any of you guys would be interested in?
Just in anticipation of some advice from council, I think that we have the relevance of Arrastradero and other streets are close to the Matadero Bike Boulevard, and we can discuss it in that context. But I think the issue of reopening the past matter is something that has not been agendized.
I guess what I'm asking is there critical mass interested in seeing a study session on that agendized? That's all I'm trying to figure out. Without that sort of input, it would never be put on the agenda, I think, right?
At the end of the meeting, when we have our updates, reports, and comments, would be a time when I would like to have a discussion of possibly that and other topics we'd like to have agendized for future meetings.
Chair Michael, if I may, very quickly, just I did want to educate the PTC, the Commission, on the fact that the city has an active project for the future design phase of the Charleston Nebraska Road Corridor project, and as part of that process, the Commission will participate in study sessions regarding the long-term final designs of the corridor itself. And so you already are scheduled next year to participate in those studies. We could potentially ask our public works staff to send you some sort of an informational memorandum regarding kind of what the future schedule for the design project may be, and that'll let you know what your upcoming involvement will be.
Commissioner Pinelli.
Well, I think I'm going to find myself in the familiar situation of being the lone dissenter tonight. So we've talked about in the past making sure that we have the reason for dissent on record so that anybody who reads it, including council, has a clear sense of why. So first I want to say I am fully supportive of the concept of encouraging bike use, more bike use, safe bike use. If it were up to me and I were king for the day, I would make some dedicated bike-only trails where bikes and cars don't have to compete because we know who's going to win that battle every time, okay? But let me explain why I'm not going to support this measure. I was actually really disappointed, to be frank, with this presentation. And the reason, I've already talked about one, which is, what are the numbers? To me, to say that it's really difficult to get the numbers just doesn't cut it. If you can't get the numbers, figure out a way to estimate the numbers. Cite other sources. I want to know, what are the number of bikers that are currently going across these different places? And if you don't have the numbers or don't have a good way of getting the numbers, come up with an estimate and tell us how you did it. Is this going to result in an increase in bikers using the bike boulevard? Perhaps, and then tell us, whether it's surveys or whatever, tell us how you got to it. The other thing I was really disappointed in is you didn't present what the other alternatives that were considered. I don't know if that's because you didn't consider any other alternatives or you just were saying, hey, this is the plan we're going with. Vice Chair Keller said, without a doubt, this is the best place, this intersection, the El Camino, Matadero, Margarita intersection is the best place for this crossing. I'm not convinced of that. I would really like to have seen a list of different alternatives and explanations as to why one is better than the other, whether it's cost or safety or whatever. I also, when you said that the goal was to build the network, building the network just for the sake of connectivity, I think is a really poor use of resources because it's effectively guesswork. And to cite a great example, look at the light rail system in LA. Really expensive, people spend a lot of time on it, and nobody rides it. And I don't want to see a situation where we build something and nobody uses it, they just keep using the same streets that they're already using. So that's why. Thanks.
So my comments on the motion before we vote. I'm generally a very strong supporter of proceeding on the basis of overall long-range planning, which is in the form of the bicycle pedestrian transportation plan, and this clearly fits within that, and I think that's excellent. I'm going to join Commissioner Pinelli in his dissent because I think that there is an absence of essential data that should have come here tonight, and rather than simply say, well, when you take it to council, have the data then, I think we just owe it to to you and to council to say that this is probably not a complete record upon which for us to make a good decision at the commission level. And I'm also, although impressed at the quality of thinking in terms of all the improvements that could be made for this to be a shared roadway for cars, cyclists, and pedestrians, and parked cars, and what have you. I'm not entirely convinced that it's going to be safe, and I think that the expectation that this is actually a formal bike boulevard is going to create an illusion of safety that is probably unwarranted. But in the best of all worlds, I would have you come back to the commission again, perhaps at the same time you have the plan for Maybell with the data, and then we will give you the blessing to take it forward. And that's, for the record, my thinking. So let's have a vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So it's 3-3. We'd like you to come back to the commission at a date uncertain. Just let us know when you're ready, and we'll give you time on the agenda. Thank you. Okay, so who voted in favor were Commissioner King, Commissioner Alchek, and Vice Chair Keller. Who voted against were Commissioner Pinelli, Martinez, and Chair Michael. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is approving the minutes of the October 9th, 2013 meeting, which the commissioners received electronically. Any questions about the minutes of the October 9th meeting? Is there a motion? Motion by Commissioner Martinez.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Pinelli. All in favor of approving the minutes of October 9th, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. And Commissioner Tanaka is absent. I guess you're now Deputy Director Ackman. Is there anything that you'd like to augment on the director's report?
No, I think Hillary covered it well. There actually hasn't been planning items on the last couple agendas other than the remarks that the mayor made at the last agenda about the two big discussions coming up in December.
One question I had, I was sort of a commission liaison to the council meeting when they talked about the infrastructure issues. Did you want to get into that at all? I know that the council voted to approve an additional round of community outreach and polling, and I actually was called at my home this afternoon, and I was polled. But do you want to talk about that? That's, I think, of some significance to us.
Thank you. Through the infrastructure committee, they had developed a number of questions about funding mechanisms from everything from the police station to downtown parking garages, and they've been developing questions, and they had the first round of polling several months ago, and they took it to the council this time and went forward with the second round. So this week they'll be polling the public. Heard from another person that also got a call today, and those results will be brought back to the council, I believe in December, the second meeting in December, and I could also communicate the results of that to the commission as well.
Thank you very much. Are there any other reports from commissioners who were liaisons to any other of our representations?
Right here. I'd like to report as chair of the subcommittee for the comprehensive plan that we're done, but we're not. Yeah, we still have the government element to convene on, And the subcommittee's meeting next week or 2 weeks on the land use element before it comes back to the commission, because we realized that most of you haven't reviewed it. It was last reviewed 2011. So we're working away. I think the government element will come at our last meeting in December, first meeting in January.
As the liaison to the Regional Housing Mandate Committee, I'll just note that the committee is meeting tomorrow to take up the issue of the density bonus ordinance, which the commission has heard. And if anybody has an interest in that topic, the meeting's at 4 o'clock in the council conference room tomorrow afternoon. A number of commissioners have considered the possibility of study session topics. Commissioner Pinelli, was that what you wanted to raise?
I was going to report on both the parking subcommittee as well as my council liaison duties.
Excellent. Please proceed.
All right. Thank you. Well, I'll start with council liaison duties. Our esteemed new director stole my thunder when she pushed the director's report up early and talked about how council has pushed off the discussions about both the J. Paul project and 27 University until after December 2nd. So December 2nd council meeting is a meeting where council is going to talk about the direction of the city. Effectively, what do we want to be? Which direction do we want to go given the results of the Measure D? And then December 9th will be a more direct discussion about development. At last night's meeting, sorry, that was last night's meeting. At the November 4th meeting, I thought there were some really interesting discussions about, well, first they brought up that the CEQA suit for the Cal Avenue improvements was dismissed or won. I'm not sure which one of the two it was, but I think it was dismissed, right?
Yes, this was the CEQA lawsuit brought by some of the businesses on the California Avenue streetscape project, and it was recently heard by the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal upheld the trial court's order essentially dismissing the lawsuit.
Thank you. And then Richard Hackman did a fine job updating the entire council on things going on with high-speed rail. And more importantly, I think for us to consider is there was a whole long discussion about grade separation and hiring an engineer to do an analysis to see what the costs of doing grade separations at the 3 crossings that currently do not, the 3 crossings across the Caltrain corridor that do not have grade separations.
There are 4.
3 in South Palo Alto.
Oh, Churchill, I forgot, sorry. Right, Churchill, Meadow, Charleston. Oh, yeah, okay. Anyway, yeah, but they were only going to, that's right. They were only going to do the analysis for South Palo Alto because the concern with Palo Alto Avenue is the creek is there, and so there's a whole issue of environmental issues with doing something below grade so close to the creek. And so there was this huge difference in cost, including that in the analysis, so they're only going to do the 3 South Palo Alto crossings as an analysis, and that will help guide whether they should even pursue the project any further. Okay. All right. And then moving on to the formerly known as Downtown Parking Subcommittee, Given that the council has decided to take anything associated with downtown parking upon themselves and not use this body as a vetting organization, the parking subcommittee met last week. It was myself and Commissioner Alchek. Vice Chair Keller was not able to attend, but was able to give us some very good input, at which point we decided to sort of rededicate our charter toward something that we do have purview over. And in this case, what we've decided is to keep a narrow focus and look at specifically the 4 per 1,000 parking requirement, and to see whether that's still relevant or not, and look at what other. So it's effectively a research project, and we'll come back to this commission with any of our findings.
So if I can comment on that, I think that the idea that the Planning Commission would have subcommittees is something that we want to take very seriously. To my knowledge, we have not approved any mandate or charter or direction for a parking subcommittee, and until such time as that happens, there is no parking subcommittee that the Commission has mandated.
May I speak? That's actually incorrect. When our esteemed Chairman Emeritus was, we did create the subcommittee.
There was a proposed charter which was specifically related just to the downtown parking study, which is not underway. I would like any research that you'd like to do voluntarily. Please proceed with that. But as far as having a subcommittee, we should not have any sort of self-proclaimed subcommittees without a formal charter sort of agreed by the Commission as a whole. And I'm not aware that we have such agreement with the parking committee.
Can I chime in here? Because I thought last meeting you assigned me to the parking committee. I mean, I'm just saying. I didn't come up with that.
Yeah.
You said, would you like to be on the parking committee? I said yes.
And help to come up with the charter of the committee, which we don't have yet.
Got it.
Vice Chair Keller.
And can I comment on one thing real quick? First, the discussion of downtown, the downtown parking program or downtown RPP hasn't even got to the council yet. We're going to have a discussion on, potentially discussion on December 16th about establishing a framework for a citywide program with certain criteria. And once the council gives policy direction, there's a good chance that when it comes down to a neighborhood level that the commission would be involved in something like that. So there's been no decision by the council not to involve the commission within the parking or downtown program. The second thing is regarding the 1 per 250. The downtown development cap study has officially kicked off. One of the first things that we're going to be doing is we had them beef up the budget for a polling firm to actually go downtown and poll the companies that work down there to really find out two critical factors. Number one, what is the actual office density on average for office uses in downtown Palo Alto? And number two, what is the actual mode share of how people are getting into Palo Alto? You know, what percentage are taking cars, what percentage are taking the train, what percentage are walking, etc. So that's something that we're going to front load into the study and should have some pretty good numbers within the first few months.
Just chime in here real quick. Is it, in that case, would it be appropriate to suggest that Secretary Elner delete this parking subcommittee category, because I just think it suggests accountability about an issue, and I think it's inappropriate to have sort of our three names associated with an issue, because maybe individuals will reach out to us about issues like this and want to discuss it, and until such time we've actually created this committee or it's been sanctioned, I just don't think it's appropriate, at least for my name, to be on there. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
On the agenda where it says subcommittees, it lists parking subcommittee, and I just... I don't think we should have it there if there is no committee.
Vice Chair Keller.
So firstly, I think that I understand that we were in the process of being formed, and we were asked as one of our first tasks to come up with a charter for the committee. So I think we should go ahead and do that and get that charter understood by the rest of the commission, giving us the thing to go after. That being said, I do think that that the consideration is not only what's parking downtown, but also what's parking throughout the city. Exactly. And the ratios of 1 per 250 not only affect downtown, but they affect other areas. So to the extent that we are able to gather data that's not specific to Palo Alto, that talks about trends that are going on in general, I think that would not be conflicting with what's going with the downtown CAP study, and may better inform us in terms of that, because the data is the data on 1 per 250 is rather old and could be updated. Thank you.
So I would like to appreciate Vice Chair Keller for stating very clearly my understanding of the situation, that this is a committee that there's a strong desire for us to provide and operate. Currently, it doesn't have a clear direction or a specific set of goals, and I think it's an issue of extreme importance to the community and to the council, and I think it's an area where we can make a meaningful contribution, and it's vital that we not operate at cross purposes or with any sort of misunderstanding as to what these efforts should entail. So I would confirm my understanding is the same as what Vice Chair Keller has succinctly stated, and I look forward to getting a proposal from the committee as to a clear sense of direction or deliverables. Commissioner Martinez.
I don't know if the statute of limitations applies, but in 2010, then Chair Garber selected himself and me as the comp plan subcommittee. There was no charter, no vote of the commission, and maybe we don't exist.
Okay. If you don't mind chiming in.
Commissioner Alchek.
Okay, so just two quick notes. I think one of the concerns that, when the pseudo parking committee met, and only 2 of the 3 of us were there, so it was really an insignificant meeting. But one of the things that I think we both felt was that there is a lot of unknowns. We don't really know how the city council will take on this issue. And it's funny because at the beginning of last time's meeting, you suggested that I get involved in the parking committee. And by the end of our last meeting, we were sort of informed that the major parking issues that are affecting our city are sort of, that effort to kind of deal with that is going to be led by city council, as opposed to, let's say, a more typical, I don't know. Anyways, the point is, I think the meeting we had was, what are we focusing on? It seems like we don't know what we're focusing on. So that's one comment. The second comment I wanted to make is I sort of would still like to know, and the reason why I'm asking this question is because I really do firmly believe that we should always be reconsidering decisions we make that impact our neighborhoods. Always. We should always have if we require our decisions to stand the test of time forever, then this is the United States Congress, not the local planning commission. So I really want to re-raise this question, whether there's whether I'm alone here, or if there's other interest here to potentially host a study session on the Arrastadero calming project, specifically 4 lanes to 2 lanes, or whatever that is, to see if we can get community input on that issue, because I think it had a huge impact on the Maybell project, and I think that there was relevance tonight. So I'm just informal poll. Is that something that the rest of you would like to, look into?
Vice Chair Keller.
So firstly, the decisions we make are not cast in stone, but they sometimes are cast in concrete and asphalt, as in this case. I think that there was the decision made to move forward. There was a decision made to make a decision to move forward with Charleston Rastero. And when we were considering the timeline and decided at some point, I realized most of you weren't on the commission then, but when we decided to move to extend the trial for another year, there was a discussion as to what to do once that trial was extended for another year. And the consideration about that is that I wouldn't say that we have 2 lanes now. What we really have is mostly 3 lanes. In some places, that 3rd lane disappears, and in some places there are 4 lanes, but essentially mostly 3 lanes, because there are left turn lanes. And the left turn lanes actually do improve safety and traffic flow in ways, make it more predictable in ways that the 4-lane model didn't. The people going around actually was considerably unsafe. And therefore, if there were an alternative to the to additional lanes.
Excuse me, I really don't mean to interrupt. I didn't suggest that I wanted to have a discussion on its merits. I was suggesting whether, and it's sort of a yes or no informal poll, whether there was interest in looking into it and hearing input from the community about the topic, even though it's already been done. I don't know if it's appropriate to discuss its merits right now. I really just want to know if there's any inkling from the others about hosting a future opportunity to discuss its merits. Sorry to interrupt.
Chair,
Yes.
it is a bit unusual to get into details at, even at this level on this item as agendized. This is a fairly controversial issue, and it really should be agendized if you are going to be having discussions. May I suggest that at the next pre-commission meeting, when we typically go over the tentative agenda, that we take that item up at that level?
Yeah, that's acceptable. And I invite Commissioner Alchek to attend the pre-commission meeting
May I suggest also?
Wait, let me just. I think one of the concerns that we have is there's a pent-up desire regarding our understanding our priorities, and there are a number of planning issues which are becoming very significant in the community, and we have been contemplating holding a retreat for some time. Haven't gotten around to it. I see in the to-be schedule this is listed in Q3, Q4. I'd like to see this moved up to Q1. And at the retreat, I would imagine, among other topics, we should agendize the Commission's priorities, study sessions that we would like to undertake, and possibly objectives of our subcommittees. The exact timing of the retreat, I understand that Director Gittleman has been tasked by City Manager Keene to organize her understanding of the priorities of the department, and I'd like to consider holding our retreat as soon as possible after those departmental priorities have been clarified, so that we could be fully supportive of those priorities and organize our own work to be the most relevant. And perhaps at that session we could flesh out a lot of the pent-up thinking and creativity that we're seeing tonight. Okay. Are there any, commission representation at council meetings? I will volunteer to be the liaison in December, and Vice Chair Keller has volunteered to be the liaison in January. And I will let Robin know that. Any other comments? Commissioner Pinelli.
Yeah, I'd like to, I mentioned at, I think, a couple previous meetings, the idea of a specific plan, or what we here in Palo Alto call a coordinated area plan, since we have to have our own terminology for most things. Amongst, when I talk to members of the community and even some neighborhood leaders, it's crickets. And it was pointed out to me that most people don't know what a specific plan is. So I'd like to request that we agendize sometime in the Q1 period a study session about specific plans or coordinated area plans and their uses in other places. I know that our deputy director did one in his previous position with San Bruno. And I think it would be highly educational for us to understand all of the tools in our tool belt. And that's a tool that we really just haven't explored. So I'm putting it out there, and hopefully other members of this commission will support me on that.
Commissioner Alchek.
I'm actually curious, would it be possible to get to sort of have an informational presentation on the San Bruno stuff that you worked on?
Sure. I think that'll be something that I work with the new director and the chair on putting it on an agenda sometime within the next couple months.
I think, I mean, at least from my perspective, I'm curious how
Sure.
The perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that would be satisfactory. Vice Chair Keller?
Yes, it would also be helpful to add to that discussion the SOFA plans. I think there was SOFA 1 and SOFA 2 that are experienced in Palo Alto, because that will also inform the nature of what is possible here since we've done that. Thank you.
Commissioner King.
Yeah, if I may ask a question, and I'm not sure maybe everyone knows this, but I'll ask it of Assistant Senior City Attorney Cara Silver. What are the requirements or the protocol around creating subcommittees?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner King. I was actually just looking at your protocols just now to see if there was something. And there aren't any written protocols on formation of subcommittees at the Planning and Transportation Commission level. Historically, what has happened is that they have been formed at the annual retreat. And so since we didn't have one last year, what happened was I believe that the chair appointed a couple of subcommittees, which is also, perfectly appropriate. And so those are the two ways that you have formed them in the past.
The phrase self-proclaimed isn't in there at all about creating committees, no? And then my other question along those lines is, it seems like it would be more informative and probably safer if on our list of committees, any that were ad hoc were explicitly named as such, because I believe those then are not subject to Brown Act disclosure of their meetings.
Right. All of your committees are ad hoc. They're limited duration committees, and so they typically just last for a year, and it's an ad hoc committee with a very limited mission, and so they typically are not Brown Act committees.
I see. Although, is that true? Like comp plan, I mean, that's been going on, I think, forever now, right? So those, in that case, because isn't it a 1 year is typically if it's longer than a year, then it's no longer considered ad hoc?
That's been a rule of thumb. It's not a legal standard, but it's rule of thumb Some of the comp plan committees, my understanding is that the committee members have changed on those, and so they have been sort of reconstituted from year to year.
Okay, well, you are the person who knows, so we'll carry on unless you mention otherwise. Thanks.
So hopefully we're looking forward to having a very productive retreat, including clarifying our committee structure. And in the absence of any further comments, is there a motion to adjourn? So moved, seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Meeting adjourned at 9:15.